Chapter 328. The third prince suddenly became a little anxious. Jilin's response was beyond his expectations. According to his original plan, Jilin's attitude when he started this war should be very contemptuous. Jilin should not care about the humans at all. He should gather his army and crush the humans. Perhaps he even had the idea of finishing the war as soon as possible. To Jilin, the humans were like insects. The most efficient and convenient way to eliminate a large number of insects was to gather them together. Jilin's plan should be to gather the main forces of both sides and have a decisive battle of the century. It was like how no one would think of dividing and destroying a nest of ants. But, looking at Jilin's plan now, it did not seem to be the case. If Jilin did not choose to fight head-on, the humans would have a huge headache. Countless orc warriors divided into thousands of small armies and harassed the human borders day and night. The humans would only be exhausted from running. There were too many places for the humans to defend. It was still okay in the past. At least the humans could rely on strong cities to defend themselves. But now they had Jilin. How could the humans have strong cities to defend themselves? A cliff blocked the orc army's march. Jilin came over and flattened the cliff. A huge city blocked the orc army's advance. Jilin came over and blew up the city. There was no way to fight. Brother Long, this is not like you. The third prince smiled a little reluctantly. Jilin chuckled. What kind of personality do I have? You're incomparably proud. The third prince said, you should fight the humans head-on. That's your style. Fight head-on? Ha ha. Jilin looked up to the sky and laughed. You think you're worthy? The third prince was silent. He suddenly realized that in Jilin's eyes, the humans might not even be comparable to ants. Jilin couldn't even be bothered to choose an easy way to destroy the human race. Brother Long, the third prince, narrowed his eyes. I have a suggestion. Tell me about it. Jilin was done laughing. Brother Long, why did you start this war? What are your intentions? I can understand. The third prince's expression was very serious. Brother Long has done me a great favor, and now that I'm the human emperor, I have the responsibility to protect the people. I should help Brother Long find Lee Sena, no matter what. Boo! Jilin was stunned. The third prince was also stunned. Then, he let out a long sigh and said, the princess of the divine dragon empire that you wanted. Oh! Jilin nodded, indicating that the third prince could continue. I can issue a war notice to the entire human race, stating that you want to attack the human race in order to capture her. As long as she has the self-awareness of royalty, I believe that she is willing to sacrifice herself for countless people. This way, a massacre can be avoided, and Brother Long can save a lot of trouble. I believe that this is Brother Long's idea. The third prince spoke with a very confident tone, as if he had a tacit understanding with them. Jilin's eyelids drooped slightly as he looked at third young master expressionlessly. Because that wasn't what he was thinking. What self-awareness of royalty? Did the human royalty really have such a thing? That black-haired human would sacrifice herself for others, for the people. Jilin had never thought of such a thing. In Jilin's opinion, this kind of thing went against the natural instincts of all living creatures. It was unreasonable. Even if there were heroes among the human race who were willing to sacrifice themselves, they were only special cases. Compared to the entire human population, they were extremely small and rare. In human terms, they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns, 1 in 10,000, the tip of the iceberg, and the hair of 9 oxen. They were not even worth mentioning. Such a small probability had no value of reference or expectation. Jilin also didn't believe that his luck would be so good that he would meet a human princess like Staya. Therefore, he didn't have any expectations for the kind of thing that the third prince mentioned. That wasn't the reason why he started the war. The black-haired human was saved by Aisha, and Jilin already knew what Aisha's goal was. Aisha had done such a big thing. She would definitely do something. And Aisha probably already knew how important the black-haired human was to him. So much time had passed, Jilin didn't believe that Bane, that coward, would be able to keep his mouth shut in front of Aisha. Once Aisha asked, Bane would definitely tell her everything. Therefore, The black-haired human would definitely be tightly controlled by Aisha, and she wouldn't even have the freedom to move. Therefore, it would be impossible for her to jump out on her own. Therefore, he could only let Aisha jump out. As long as the war started and the world was in chaos, Jilin didn't believe that Aisha wouldn't take the opportunity to stir up trouble. One could only fish in troubled water. Brother Long, the third prince, thought he guessed right. If you want to find someone, I could do my best to help you, but I don't know, Brother Long. Can you tell me something? What is it? Jilin said. If this person can't be found no matter what does Brother Long think? Or, if this person is already dead, what does Brother Long think? The third prince said in a low voice. The third prince, there is a saying among the humans, if alive, I want to see the person, if dead, I want to see the corpse. Jilin said, I gave you a month's time to find the person. The number of humans is like sand. Under normal circumstances, there is no reason why you can't find a person. However, if you really can't find the person, it means that this matter is beyond your ability, and I can only do it myself, using my own method. The third prince nodded. He had expected this result. I promised Brother Long that I will do my best to help Brother Long find the person within a month. However, to return the favor, I also want to ask Brother Long to promise me something. The third prince solemnly clasped his hands. What is it? Jilin said. The third prince took a deep breath. If we can't find the person, Brother Long's army will arrive. Regardless of who wins or loses, it is inevitable that the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I also know that Brother Long has no choice, but the soldiers of the orcs and humans are innocent. As a human emperor, I must stop this. How are you going to stop it? Jilin rubbed his fingernails, sparks flying everywhere. If we can't find the person, in a month's time, at the border between Mount Gerda and the Saimai Empire, I hope Brother Long will compete with me. The world will bear witness. The third prince's expression was solemn, his voice like a large bell, and his aura suddenly rose. If I lose, then there is no need to mention anything, but if I win, then I can only ask Brother Long to think otherwise. Before the outcome is decided, I ask Brother Long not to harm a single human. Jilin was silent. He raised his head and thought for a moment. What exactly was the third prince saying? You want to fight with me? Jilin felt that he understood, but it also seemed like he didn't. That's right. I hope Brother Long can't fulfill my wish. You're courting death, Jilin said, but he was a little hesitant. After all, a human courting death was a little suspicious no matter how he looked at it. Brother Long, are you afraid? I'll kill you right now. Chapter 329. Jilin clamored to kill the third prince. Although the third prince was frightened, he didn't really do it. Because Jilin finally looked at the third prince with a trace of appreciation and recognition in his eyes. The third prince, do you still remember the man I told you was called the hegemon of Western Chu? Jilin suddenly said with emotion. The third prince nodded his head vigilantly. Of course he remembered, and it left a deep impression on him. Back then, Jilin had almost killed him when he told him about this matter. For a period of time, he had been trying to figure out who was who. Although he asked a lot of people afterward, he didn't find anything. Your momentum just now was very similar to his. Jilin walked to the third prince's side and looked at him like he was looking at a rare animal. He also said the same thing in the past. All the people in the world are only a few years old. I'm willing to challenge the king of Han. I don't want the people of the world to suffer. What do you think? Very bold, right? You can also do it. You even dare to challenge me. Even though it's impossible for you to win, I'll play with you for the sake of your ambition. 1 month later, wait for your death. Oh, the third prince was a little confused. Thank you, Brother Long, you're welcome. Jilin waved his hand. But according to Brother Long, the hegemon of Western Chu is really a hero. Why haven't I heard of him? The third prince said. Hero? Jilin smiled faintly. That's not entirely true. Why do you say that? The third prince asked. Because if it was a duel, the king of Han shouldn't have been able to defeat the hegemon of Western Chu. At that time, the hegemon of Western Chu was the strongest person in the human race, and the king of Han's personal strength was about the same as you without the power of the human emperor. In other words, The hegemon of Western Shu's words can be said to be very bullying. Jilin said. The third prince raised his head and thought for a moment. His mind was in a mess. Since it's settled, I'll take my leave first. I still have a big matter to attend to. Please forgive me, Brother Long. The third prince decided not to think about it since he still had something important to do. As for who the hegemon of Western Shu was, how could he care about this now? He could do whatever he wanted. What else do you want? Jilin asked curiously. Go back and have children, third young master said in a low voice. He lowered his head and cupped his hands toward Jilin. Then, he transformed into a golden dragon and disappeared into the clouds. Jilin looked at the third prince's receding figure and thought to himself, why is the human imagination of dragons so strange? How can they fly without wings? Was there really a son of the dragon or not? Somewhere in the Saimai Empire. In an ordinary-looking manor, there was a sealed underground space in the depths of the manor, a completely sealed space. This space was rectangular and was about the size of the entire manor. This was one of Aisha's secret bases. A faint purple light lit up, illuminating this space with a gloomy aura. It was like a ghost town that, Sister Aisha, can we change the color of the light? Bane came to Aisha's side and asked nervously. Aisha glanced at Bane. Sure, what color do you want it to be? White. Bane said. I don't like white. Aisha decisively rejected. I know, Bane complained in his heart. But there was nothing he could do since Aisha was so determined. Sister Aisha, we've been here for a few days. Why can't I find the exit? Bane looked around the huge basement. Because there's no need. Aisha didn't even raise her head. She was seriously writing and drawing on a table against the wall. The light was too dim, so Bane couldn't see what she was writing. But he vaguely saw that Aisha wasn't drawing on paper. It looked like a map. There's no need. Bane was silent. Aisha didn't need things like passageways or doors. With the scripture of darkness, it was easier for her to use an ordinary teleportation portal than to walk. If she didn't want others to find this space, then there was no need to set up a passageway or exit. Just directly sealing it was in line with Aisha's practical concept. This was a space that only Aisha knew about and could enter. Then how was this basement built? Bane asked. Not designing a passageway or exit was in line with Aisha's needs, but it was definitely not in line with the design concept of human architects. It's very simple. When I was building the manor, I said that I wanted a basement, so they dug it. When they were almost done with the basement, I said that I didn't want the basement anymore and had them fill up the passageway. Are you even human? By the way, the manor above is also yours. So, this basement has been sealed since it was built. Yes. Then why isn't the air stuffy at all? I used a magic array. If you really don't ask, just ask about a magic array. Bane pursed his lips. Then, Scram. Okay, there was a limit to a person's patience. Once this limit was exceeded, a person would break down. Of course, some people would explode. For example, Aisha. Bane left with a grin on his face. But when he turned around, his expression darkened. They were locked up by Aisha. This was a completely sealed room. There was no entrance or exit from the building. It didn't want people to enter, and, at the same time, it didn't want people to leave. This was an inhumane building, and it was built so decisively. Even the mausoleums of royalty and nobles had tomb doors and tomb passageways. Although they didn't have any practical use other than making it convenient for tomb robbers, they had them. Of course, he didn't rule out the idea that the tomb owner would come out after 1,000 years. But obviously, Aisha didn't have such an idea. This was a bit difficult. Bane suddenly felt like he had just left the dragon's lair and entered the tiger's den. If he had to choose between Jilin and Aisha, Bane would rather choose Jilin. Although Jilin was definitely powerful compared to Aisha, he was definitely a rash and straightforward person. Although Aisha wasn't as powerful as Jilin, she was unfathomable and made people shudder. The room was very large. Bane walked for a long time before he reached her current residence. It was just a simple bed without a room to speak of. However, there were all kinds of tables, chairs, stools, books, and toys. They were all collected by Aisha over the years. This was obviously where Aisha stored her stuff. A mummy covered in bandages was lying on the bed. Although his breathing was weak, he would cough every once in a while, as if to prove that he wasn't dead. He actually wasn't dead. Bane looked at the hero and felt a little emotional. This was the only human Bane had seen who was still alive after taking Jilin's dragon breath, as expected of the hero. But that was all. Chapter 330. As Bane looked at the bedridden hero and the delicate princess Lysana, he could not help but think of the words old, weak, sick, and disabled. At the same time, he thought about how to explain to the two that the three of them were now prisoners. Bane felt a headache coming on. They had just escaped the wolf's den only to enter the tiger's den. Bane was afraid that Lysana would not be able to take this blow. After thinking for a while, Bane decided not to say anything. In any case, Hero could not get out of bed, and Princess Lysana was like a startled bird, not wanting to go out. Of course, after being captured and imprisoned by someone like Jilin for so many days, she would definitely be traumatized. What a sin! He turned such a young girl into a shut-in. Clang, clang, clang. Bane kicked an unknown metal object beside his foot, treating it as knocking on the door. Lysana's entire body stiffened as she turned her head somewhat stiffly. When she saw that it was Bane, she immediately released her bated breath. Bane's heart tightened when he saw Princess Lysana's reaction. There were only 4 people in this space, and the only ones who could appear behind her were him and Aisha. So, the princess's behavior showed that she was afraid of Aisha. That made sense. Aisha was so famous on the continent. As the Divine Dragon Empire's princess, how could Lysana not have heard of her? It turned out that the princess already knew that the current situation was not good. Cough, cough, cough. Hero's continuous coughs interrupted Bane's thoughts. Right now, there was not a single part of his body that was unharmed. Every time he spoke or moved, he would suffer immense pain. Lysana quickly turned her head back, anxiously checking on Hero's condition. Actually, there was no need to check. Everyone knew that Hero's condition could not get any worse. However, Lysana still showed a flustered expression, her concern evident in her words. Wow, wow, wow. They hooked up so quickly. Bane's eyes filled with disdain and contempt as he looked at the two. There was also a flash of jealousy. Bane did not know why. He was the one who carried Lysana up from the 22nd floor of the Red Dragon Palace. Even though he did draw his sword across her snow-white neck to scare her, he had explained that he had no choice but to do so. Why was it that the one who won the princess's favor was the hero in the end? Could it be that this was the so-called predestined fate? How could he be so unreasonable? No, could this be a curse that Jilin cast on me? He did mock me about this before, saying that the girls I like don't like me. Now that I betrayed him, this is how he takes revenge on me. From then on, he would be alone for the rest of his life. He would never be able to find a woman that he liked. Jilin, how could you be so vicious? To think that I thought you were an honest and good dragon. I was wrong about you. Woo woo woo. The more Bane thought about it, the angrier he became. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. He had completely blamed Jilin for not having a woman that liked him. It was only because Jilin was far away that he didn't know what Bane was thinking. If he knew, he would definitely say, "What does it have to do with me?" and turn Bane into a wisp of green smoke. How could the noble dragon race suffer such injustice? Shadow, shadow, cough, cough. The hero's pained voice rang out. Bane finally snapped out of his daze and looked at the hero. At the same time, he noticed that Lysana was looking at him with even more resentment. Bane shivered. He understood why Lysana was so wary of her savior. It seemed that she had heard of the name Shadow before. As one of the most famous rebels in the Red Dragon sect, the princess of the Empire naturally would not treat him well. But the problem was that Lysana should not have known about this. It was the hero who sold him out. Damn it. If I had known this would happen, I would have listened to Aisha and left you alone. Bane looked at the hero with an aggressive gaze. The hero, however, misunderstood. He thought that Shadow was still brooding over their former enmity. The hero waved his hand painfully. Sir Shadow, although you are a member of the Red Dragon sect, when you saw Princess Lysina suffer, you were able to turn over a new leaf and turn over a new leaf. This is enough to prove that you are a righteous person. You can still distinguish between right and wrong. I'm sure you were just muddle-headed in the past. As the saying goes, a prodigal son is more precious than gold. I am willing to let bygones be bygones and shake hands with you. You're quite magnanimous to steal my girl. Vane rolled his eyes, but he said calmly, of course. However, I have a question for you. Would you be able to dispel my doubts? Please speak. The hero looked at Bane with a scrutinizing gaze. You are the hero. Why did you lower yourself and become a storyteller in auspicious Cloud City? Bane asked. Sir, you don't trust me. The hero lay down again. His injuries were too severe. Bane thought to himself, I rarely trust people these days, but he still pretended to be confused. Why do you say that? Hero rolled his eyes and glanced at Bane. He seemed to be smiling, but at the same time he didn't. Because you know very well that our goal is the same. We both want to find a way to the Elven Island. I know you've already succeeded. You and the Red Disaster have both been to the Elven Island. You've been there too, Bane said. Of course. Roar sighed. How else could I have fought the Red Disaster? Unfortunately, the hero suddenly roared at the sky. His voice was miserable, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. However, there was only madness in his eyes. Bane stared blankly at the hero. The hero's voice was like that of a demon who had suffered in hell for countless years. It was filled with unwillingness. It was hard to imagine that a human could make such a voice. It was also hard to imagine that a human could feel such despair. She was so frightened by the roar that she forgot to stop the hero. The roar was so loud that Aisha heard it as well. However, she only glanced at the hero, her eyes filled with schadenfreude and disdain. This was a battle that concerned the fate of the world. How could they treat it so lightly? They didn't even know the depth of the enemy's strength. They rushed forward rashly, without leaving any leeway. Not long after, they only knew how to charge forward. This was too stupid. What was the god of light thinking? Why would he find such a hothead? Bane panicked when he saw Roar bleeding more and more. That's enough. Just shout. There are many people who can't beat him. You don't have to be so upset. Bane didn't know if his words were meant to be sarcastic or comforting, but the hero was stunned and stopped shouting. The hero's mouth moved, but he didn't make a sound. Bane guessed that he was cursing at someone. That's right. When you challenge an enemy that you can't defeat, use all your strength, fight to the death, and fight with all your might, but still lose. What else can you do? It was nothing more than a silent curse. Just like how humans could only helplessly face fate. Chapter 331. What was Hero thinking when he fought Jilin? Bane couldn't figure it out. Bane didn't think it was wise to keep fighting even though he knew he couldn't win. Of course, it was possible that the brave warrior believed that he could win before the battle between him and Crimson Lyn. However, Bane didn't believe Hero didn't realize he was going to lose halfway through the fight. Even he could tell at a glance that Hero wasn't Jilin's match. Hero should know better. However, the hero was still going all out against Jilin. He didn't have the slightest thought of retreating. To Bane, Hero was like a creature who only knew how to walk in a straight line. He kept walking south without turning back until he reached the southern wall. That was why he slammed his head against the wall again and again until he bled. However, he didn't waver in the slightest. He just kept slamming his head against the wall until it collapsed or he was smashed to pieces. Such creatures were extremely stupid in the eyes of the world, but they were also revered, because they were either lunatics or possessed shocking obsessions. Bane let out a long sigh. Is there any enmity between you and Jilin? He killed my entire family. Hero's voice was unexpectedly calm. It didn't match his words at all. That wasn't the right tone to talk about a blood feud. Bane and Lysina were stunned. They almost didn't react in time. Bane pondered for a moment. Did he do it on purpose? Of course not. How could humans like us enter his line of sight? Hero chuckled in a self-deprecating manner. It just flew over my house by accident. Its body was so huge that it created a gust of wind when it flew over. My family wasn't in good condition at the time. We lived in a wooden house that wasn't sturdy enough. The wind it created caused it to collapse. Grandfather and mother were in the house at the time. What about your father? Bane knew he shouldn't ask, but he couldn't stop himself from asking. At the time, father was working on the land around the house. That was the source of most of the family's income. The brave warrior's voice was as calm as ever. It was unknown whether it was because too much time had diluted his sorrow or because his sorrow was greater than the death of his heart. He managed to escape. Bane breathed a sigh of relief for no reason. No, father was swept up into the sky by that gust of wind. He flew a few hundred meters behind the red disaster before finally landing heavily on the ground. His blood splattered all over the grass. In order to collect father's remains, I wandered the grass for half the night before finally giving up. Bane understood, but he was confused again. For what Hero said, Jilin hadn't done anything wrong. He was just flying in the sky. The only thing that could be blamed was that he was flying too low. The brave one was even more correct. The hatred of killing one's father and exterminating one's family was absolutely irreconcilable. This sentence was absolutely correct, no matter the time. Since both sides were in the wrong, it could only be said that fate was playing tricks on them. Bane originally wanted to persuade Hero to be more open-minded. No matter how many lives Hero had, it wouldn't be enough to take revenge on Jilin. Even if he died 100 times, it would be in vain. It wouldn't even count as a sacrifice. Only a worthy death could be called a sacrifice. A worthless death could only be called a suicide. However, when the words reached his mouth, Bane couldn't bring himself to say them. If he hadn't suffered, he wouldn't try to persuade him to be magnanimous. Lysana was in tears as she listened. She couldn't stop sobbing, her tears forming two sparkling lines on her face. Bane glanced at her and thought, "You're crying so pitifully for someone else. It seems you're not much luckier than Hero. His family was destroyed, but you're the one who lost your country." "Shadow," Hero suddenly said. Let me ask you a question. I hope you can answer me truthfully. In your current state, there's no need for me to lie to you. After I went to Calmwind Pass, I heard that auspicious Cloud City was breached by the Red Dragon sect, and City Lord Geraint died. Is there such a thing?" Hero looked at Bane, the light in his eyes piercing through his heart. Bane felt a little guilty under his gaze and nodded weakly. "Yes, there is such a thing. Before I left, City Lord Geraint should have already made arrangements. I also felt that it was foolproof. That's why I dared to bring half of auspicious Cloud City's forces to reinforce Calmwind Pass." How did you win?" Bane was startled. Hearing Hero's words, he recalled the scene of that day. In a daze, he seemed to have returned to the second floor of the small tea house that day. His life was hanging by a thread, and flames were everywhere. The red-robed people of the Red Dragon sect sat around him. They were unafraid of death and said that they would give their lives to Jilin. Bane looked at them with a smile on his face, but cursed them in his heart. "Actually, we lost that day." Bane lowered his head. "We fell for Geraint's trap. The core forces of the Red Dragon sect were surrounded. He chased us into the tea house and set it on fire. There were countless archers outside waiting for us to charge out. The sky was vast, but we had nowhere to run." He did indeed win beautifully that day. Then, in the end, Jilin came. He saved me and also saved his believers. So, that is the case. Yes, we won by luck. At that time, the Divine Dragon Empire should have sent 2 Dragon Knights over. Jilin killed them. He could not bear to see humans riding dragons. Then, the flying dragons at Calmwind Pass going out of control is also related to the Red Disaster. Yes, he did it. Now, all the dragons in the Divine Dragon Empire are flying freely under Red Dragon City. The moment Bane said that, he regretted it. Lysana was beside him. Bane carefully glanced at Lysana. Her expression was as gloomy as water. The hero remained silent for a while. Then, after you won, the people of Reunion City, naturally, they will be safe and sound. Bane sounded very confident. The Red Dragon sect also knows that if we want that, we need the support of the people. Why would we do something that would destroy our own foundation? Very good. It seems that although you were muddle-headed and stood on the Red Disaster side, you still have a bottom line. At least, you clearly remember that you are a human. The hero sounded very gratified. F***CK. Why is a hero like you scolding me? Bane's expression sank. I don't mean anything else. What I mean is that you did not betray the human race. You still think of yourself as a human, the hero said very seriously. Bane felt very conflicted. Ever since he met the Elven Queen, he had been labeled a human traitor. Now that the hero said this, he felt somewhat happy. However, the hero still sounded like he was scolding him. I have something I need your help with. Roar's voice was as heavy as a mountain. Bane instinctively took a step back. He seemed to hear the word trouble in the hero's tone. Huge trouble. Chapter 332. Ben took a step back because his words told him so directly. What the hero was going to say next might not be what he wanted to hear. The hero's voice was too serious, making Bane feel a little pressured. What kind of tone and demeanor was that? It was like an emperor who was about to collapse had summoned his most important general and said in a tone that suggested he was giving up everything and leaving the empire's army in his hands. At that time, the general had a lot of power. He could lead the army to war everywhere, whether it was to wipe out disloyal subjects or to directly usurp the throne. It was up to him. However, power was often tied together with heavier responsibilities. A mountainous burden was placed on the general's shoulders. That was supposed to be the emperor's burden. When the emperor was powerless, he gave all his power and responsibility to the general. The power to mobilize the entire army and the responsibility to pacify the world. That wasn't something a general should do, and it wasn't something he could bear. Bane knew he was in trouble. The hero wanted to put his own responsibility on him. At this critical moment when the hero couldn't get out of bed, entrusting an important matter to a minister in the face of danger. This was using people to their deaths. What do you want to do? Bane asked. Help me deliver this to the hands of the Saintess Staya. The hero struggled to reach out to Bane. Bane and Lysina both sucked in a breath of cold air. The hero was holding a holy sword in his hand. The hero handed over his holy sword. Even when Jilin's dragon breath hit him, he didn't let go of his sword. That was the proof of his identity as a hero, a miracle from the god of light. It was his mission and the meaning of his life that he believed to be. However, in front of Bane, a former member of the Red Dragon sect, a former enemy and a thorn in his side, the hero handed over his sword. Bane's hands were clasped in front of him, and he didn't rashly take the sword. Speaking of which, Bane had approached the hero, who had been blasted away by the dragon breath, because he wanted to see this holy sword clearly. After discovering that the hero wasn't dead, he had even picked him up. Damn! Bane was annoyed. It was said that curiosity killed the cat. He didn't believe it before, but now he did. Because of a moment of curiosity, he'd picked up such a big problem. Bane was stunned on the spot, grumbling in his heart. He didn't react for a long time. It could be said that he didn't dare to move. Although the hero's action of handing over the sword was very simple, it wasn't enough for Bane to ignore the significance of the sword. This sword was too heavy. Its weight was equivalent to 100,000 mountains. What's wrong? Hero wasn't in a hurry. I'm just giving you the sword, not asking you to use it to kill the Red Disaster. What are you afraid of? Hearing Hero's words, Bane relaxed a lot. The hero was right. He was just giving the sword away. Why should I give a sword to Staya? Bane relaxed, and his thoughts became clear again. The hero laughed bitterly. His laughter contained unwillingness and regret. When I finished my training on the Elven Island and wanted to kill the Red Calamity, the Elven Queen told me that my current strength wasn't enough to kill the Red Calamity. You didn't believe her? Bane was stunned. Yes, because I was blinded by my rapid growth in strength. I didn't listen to the Elven Queen's advice. Not long ago, I was just an ordinary human. Diamond and Legend rank experts were like gods in my eyes. But in the blink of an eye, I surpassed them. There was a period of time when I thought I was invincible. I was the hero chosen by the Light God. My extraordinary strength was given to me by the Light God. It was given to me by the Light God to defeat the Red Calamity. So there was no reason why I couldn't defeat the Red Calamity. I thought the Elven Queen was lying to me. I didn't listen to her advice because I thought I could win. Moreover, I had a blood feud with the Red Calamity. Bane nodded silently. The hero's logic was clear and reasonable. The hero had a sword given to him by the god to slay dragons. There was no reason why he couldn't defeat dragons. It was like a hero in a story who passed the god's test and obtained the divine sword after much effort. This sword would definitely be able to kill the evil demon king. This was the logic that all stories had to follow. But the hero in front of Bane didn't seem to be in the scope of this logic. His situation was like the hero taking the divine sword to challenge the demon king. The hero fought bravely, like a wolf or a tiger, invincible. Finally, he found an opportunity. He jumped high behind the demon king and used all his strength to hold the divine sword. He wanted to stab the divine sword into the demon king's heart, because the god told the hero that as long as the sword pierced the demon king's heart, he would be able to kill the demon king. But the next moment, the hero realized that the divine sword couldn't even pierce through the demon king's black cape. He didn't stab the demon king's heart. He stabbed loneliness. This didn't make sense. There was only one reasonable explanation for such a ridiculous thing. That was the god and the demon king, who seemed to be on the same side. The god wanted to kill the hero through the demon king's hand. According to Bane's knowledge, Jilin's father was very familiar with all kinds of gods. Bane felt like he had seen the truth of the matter. He looked at the hero with sympathy. Then what does this have to do with Staya? The elf queen saw that I didn't listen to her advice, so she didn't try to persuade me anymore. But she said this to me. If I failed, I could give the divine sword to the current Saint of Light. She could ensure that the hero's inheritance would continue, the hero said slowly. Occasionally, a complicated light would flash through his eyes. It was as if the scene he had just described was flashing through his eyes, as if it was still vivid in his mind. Staya can inherit the hero's power? Bane shivered as if a cold snake had crawled across his back. He was all too familiar with the traces of conspiracy. There was an obvious problem with the Elf Queen's words. If the hero lost the battle with Jilin, then why should the hero give the sword to Staya? Or rather, why did the Elf Queen think that the hero could survive after failing? That was Jilin. He didn't have that kind of compassionate gene. You raised the divine sword and charged at me to kill me. I knocked you to the ground and spared your life. How could that be something Jilin would do? The hero wasn't Staya, so the Elf Queen's words didn't make sense. However, such unreasonable words actually hit the nail on the head. The hero really lost and survived. He really had to give his sword to Staya. Why? Why was it so accurate? Could the Elf Queen really see the future and predict the future? No, it could only be everything was planned in advance. Chapter 333. The hero was plotted against. Bane came to such an absurd conclusion. Bane looked at the hero, and a chill ran down his spine for no reason. He felt like he was in the middle of winter in the Snow Empire, and he was wearing thin clothes. The hero was a character chosen by God to save humanity and shoulder the responsibility of the world. But this hero was plotted against by God. No, plotting against another person was called plotting. God plotting against another person. It should be called God's own destiny. Destiny was a winding path drawn by God for humanity, and it was a straight path with no forks in the road. You could only follow this path and keep going, even if the end of this path was a bottomless abyss or endless darkness. Humans didn't have the ability to resist destiny because for humans, you would never know if you were resisting destiny or if destiny wanted you to resist destiny. You would never be able to see it clearly, but now, in Bane's eyes, the hero's destiny was clear. His end was failure. Terrifying, Bane became more afraid the more he thought about it. If this world was a story, then the hero was undoubtedly the main character of the story. Jilin should be the main villain, and the god of light, the elven queen, and other powerful existences should be the main character's teacher and guide. They should help the main character become stronger step by step and defeat the villain, allowing countless civilians to live happy and stable lives. But now, the main character's teacher and guide had betrayed the main character. The main villain was much stronger than the main character after he grew up. In other words, the main character didn't want to win from the start. This was a story of despair. Why was this? Why did God design this story? Did God want to destroy humanity? What would happen to the hero's world after the main character failed? Just thinking about it was enough to make people shudder. Humanity was enslaved by the demons, and Jilin could kill whoever he wanted. He could also kill whoever he wanted now, no. Now wasn't the time to think about this. Bane shook his head and threw away those distracting thoughts. Why Staya? Bane asked with a trembling voice. The Elven Queen said that as the Holy Maiden of Light, she is the closest person to the God of Light. She can use the Holy Sword. The hero said. Bane shook his head, obviously disagreeing with this statement. You and I are both in the Simai Empire. You should know that the person closest to the God of Light should be His Highness the Pope. That's what I said back then. It should be the case under normal circumstances. The hero's expression became hesitant. Although his face was covered in white cloth, it was impossible to see his face clearly. But Ben could feel the hesitation in him. What do you mean? Bane narrowed his eyes, and a bad feeling rose in his heart. This was because he had seen His Majesty the Pope before. He had a head full of white hair, but there were no traces of wind and frost on his face. His face was smooth, and he looked like a young man. He looked quite handsome, but also very strange. It was indeed not in line with the image of His Holiness the Pope. The Elven Queen told me that the Pope has long turned away from the God of Light. He has been corrupted by darkness, the hero said. Bane frowned and glanced at Aisha, thinking that the Elven Queen's words made sense. As a dignified Pope, it was inevitable that he would be corrupted by the darkness if he had an ambiguous relationship with a witch all day long. But could you tell me the details of this corruption? Bane looked at Aisha with a perverted gaze. To be interested in the love story of a couple over 200 years old while talking about such a topic was quite something. But no matter how curious Bane was, he did not ask. After all, she was still there. When discussing such matters, it was taboo to avoid the opposite sex. This was a common understanding of all humans, no matter which world it was in. The Pope can't use the sacred sword, but Staya can. Bane thought for a moment and felt that something was wrong. But so what if you give the sacred sword to Staya? You're the hero, the original owner of the sacred sword. If you can't beat Jilin with it, Staya definitely can't beat him either. Why give it to her? Let her and Jilin fight to their deaths. What if Staya dies? Find the next person and let him continue to challenge Jilin with the sacred sword? What is the sacred sword? A baton to die? The hero was speechless at Bane's question, but Lysana could not bear to listen to it. How can you say that about the sacred sword? This is the power that the God of Light gave to humans to defeat the Red Disaster. Lysana's words came from the bottom of her heart. As a victim of the Red Disaster, she naturally hated the Red Disaster. Isn't it a great honor to kill the Red Disaster with this sacred sword? Bane glanced at the princess from the corner of his eyes, thinking, you're a princess of the divine Dragon Empire. Why do you respect the God of Light so much? A great honor. Do you know how big the world is? Do you know what honor is? If Staya had said what Lysana said, Bane felt that he would definitely be moved to the point of hot-bloodedness. Then, he would follow her into battle in a daze. However, when it came from Lysana, Bane only disagreed. Things had already come to this point. They were all locked up by Aisha and couldn't do anything. They couldn't even try to walk out of Aisha's place. This was because Bane knew that once Aisha lost her protection, the three of them would be found by Jilin at any moment. Things had already come to this, yet the princess still couldn't bear to use her pitiful brain and see the situation clearly. The sacred sword was indeed the power that the God of Light gave to humans to defeat Jilin. However, the problem was that this power couldn't defeat Jilin at all. Hero was such an obvious example. How could she not see? She could see it. Hero was lying right in front of her. However, she just turned a blind eye and avoided talking about it. She only used some high-sounding words to convince herself that she wanted others to challenge Jilin. This was because she was filled with fear of Jilin. She only wanted Jilin to disappear from this world. She didn't care about the lives of others at all. She turned a blind eye to everything that went against this goal. Bane's gaze turned cold as he looked at Lysana. Staya was his friend and his savior. She was the most dazzling ray of light in his life so far. The image of Staya standing in front of him in the village was still vivid in Bane's mind. Lysana's attitude of not caring about Staya's life or death made Bane very uncomfortable. Your Highness is right. Since your Highness feels that this is a great honor, why don't you take up the sacred sword and slay the Red Calamity yourself, and save the people from calamity? Bane said in an exaggerated tone. Since your Highness feels that this is a great honor, why don't you take up the sacred sword and slay the Red Calamity and save the people? Bring peace to the world? You. Lysana pointed at Bane and was so angry that she couldn't speak. In her opinion, Bane was openly mocking and bickering with her. How could he let the princess kill an evil dragon? Moreover, she didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. What's wrong? Is your Highness afraid? Bane continued mocking her, not giving her any face. Could it be that the noble divine Dragon Empire's princess only dares to send others to their deaths while she hides safely in the back and enjoys the fruits of others' blood and lives? Huh, as expected of your Highness. You really have the demeanor of the divine Dragon Empire's royal family. Bane's words were too insulting. Furthermore, he wasn't just insulting Lysana, but the entire divine Dragon Empire's royal family, and even the divine Dragon Empire's nobles. The divine Dragon Empire had been plagued with problems for a long time. It was not without reason that the Red Dragon sect could do so much in the divine Dragon Empire. How could Lysana endure such mockery? Although she was in dire straits now, the royal family's dignity was still there. Lysana cried out and reached for the hero's sword. Bane watched coldly from the side. He thought to himself, this foolish princess indeed can't stand this provocation. It's good that you took the sword. Now this sword is a hot potato. Whoever wants to take it can take it. Whoever takes it will have one less problem for me and one less danger for Staya. As Lysana's hand reached for the sacred sword, the hero watched without moving. However, Lysana's hand passed through the sacred sword. It was like the sacred sword was just a mirage. The hero seemed to have expected this and did not find it strange. Lysana felt stunned. Bane slowly shivered. Chapter 334. Inside a simple room that was separated by some strange objects. At this moment, the air was filled with a deathly silence. The three of them didn't speak. It took a while for Princess Lysana to react. Wah! She burst into tears and ran away, covering her face. She felt extremely wronged. She had been scolded so harshly by this annoying fellow. He wanted to fight back, but he didn't even have the right to pick up the holy sword. The princess ran away. Bane, who was used to the darkness, clearly saw a few drops of sparkling tears fall from the princess's face, like a pear blossom in the rain. She must have found a secluded corner to cry. Why? Bane turned to look at the hero. Although he had 1,000 things to say, those were the only words that came out of his mouth. Your words just now were a little harsh, the hero said, minding his own business. She's a princess after all, and she's still young. According to the words of the Middle Empire, she's been pampered since she was young and lived a life of luxury. It's understandable that she didn't consider some things at the moment. Not all princesses are like the saintess. Why? Bane ignored the hero's words. You're the famous Shadow. You should have thought of this, but you still said such harsh words to the princess. And from the fact that you risked your life to carry her out of Red Dragon City, even betraying the Red Calamity, you're someone who cares about women. The hero looked at Bane with a playful gaze. Looks like you really care about the saintess. Why? Bane raised his voice, his tone harsher. There were only the two of them in the room, but they kept talking about their own topics. Although it was fine to talk like that, it was meaningless. Fine. The hero seemed to admit defeat. The radiant holy sword isn't an ordinary item. Do you think anyone can pick it up? What if a thief steals it before I grow up? What if the nobles of the Empire covet it? What if it's accidentally lost? It's an item exclusive to the hero. According to what you said, Staya shouldn't be able to pick it up either. Bane narrowed his eyes like the edge of a willow leaf. The idea of being close to the god of light seems a bit far-fetched. Not bad. The hero fell silent for a moment, but finally nodded. But that's what the Elven Queen told me as well. Then why should I give the holy radiant sword to Staya? This was Bane's biggest question. Escorting the sacred sword was such an important task. Why would the hero dare to give it to someone who had just betrayed the Red Disaster? Don't you think it's too hasty? Even if the hero trusted him, he wasn't strong enough to accomplish such a big task. What makes you think I can lift it? Bane said in a deep voice. Why would I think that? That's not important. The hero smiled. What's important is whether or not you can pick it up, isn't that right? The hero handed the sacred sword back to Bane. Bane instinctively took half a step back, still not daring to take it. In Bane's eyes, the sacred sword was no longer a legendary weapon. It was no longer just a sword that looked incomparably cool. It was now a god's malice and conspiracy against humans. As long as one was tainted by it, one could forget about getting rid of it. However, Bane didn't take it. The hero just kept handing it to him. The two of them froze. In the end, Bane gritted his teeth. His expression was ferocious, and his eyes revealed a fierce glint. Just now, the hero had given in on the topic. Now it was his turn. However, no matter what, they couldn't remain in a stalemate. Moreover, Bane didn't believe he could pick up the sacred sword. Lysana was the princess of the divine dragon empire in Jilin's heart. If even she couldn't pick it up, how could he? Bane understood the situation. He reached out and took the sacred sword. His hand immediately sank. Damn it, he picked it up. This. Bane was so flustered that he couldn't speak properly. He looked at the hero and couldn't say a complete sentence. Since that's the case, Your Excellency Shadow, I'll have to trouble you. The hero cupped his fists at Bane. He had the chivalrous demeanor of a person from the Middle Empire. Bane's heart turned cold. It turned out that he had been involved in the God of Light's conspiracy from the very beginning. To think that he was still thinking about tainting it a little. How laughable. Bane's hand trembled slightly. He wanted to return the sacred sword to the hero, but the hero ignored him this time. Bane kept handing the sacred sword to the hero, who closed his eyes and rested. The hero didn't care. He could lie in bed for an entire day without moving. Bane couldn't outlast him. The two of them froze again. I'm not worthy of holding this sword. Bane tried his best to speak sincerely. The hero looked at Bane strangely. He thought to himself, isn't it good that you're holding it? Those who weren't worthy of holding it would be crying somewhere by now. Why should I? Bane asked. He didn't know when he, who had been ordinary since birth, had been schemed against. How did he stand out from the vast majority of ordinary people? I have a guess about this, the hero said, but it's really just my guess. There's a spring of life on the Elven Island. Have you entered it before? Bane's eyes suddenly widened as if he had been struck by lightning. Can anyone who has entered the spring of life pick up the sacred sword? Yes, this sacred sword was created by the god of light and the god of forging. The water from the spring of life is the most supplementary material, so Bane understood. He was just a chess piece on the god's chessboard, manipulated by others. The gods had already decided his fate. However, the phrase rebelling against fate was always popular among humans. They always wanted to overestimate themselves and give it a try. Bane looked around. He saw that Aisha's basement was in a mess. It seemed like it wouldn't be eye-catching to casually throw the sacred sword anywhere. Bane, who was extremely nervous, was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. His mind was already on the verge of collapse. In a moment of desperation, he actually came up with the evil idea of destroying the corpse of the holy sword. The hero saw through his thoughts at a glance and said calmly, "That's humanity's hope of defeating the Red Disaster." Bane was stunned. He has never thought of destroying humanity. Has he never thought of it? He has, but he won't do it. Haha, why? Because he's very lazy. Haha. Are you sure you want to place humanity's fate on the laziness of the Megalosaurus? When I saw you in the Divine Dragon Empire, you weren't as naive as you are now. There's really no need. Humans and Jilin can coexist. Then, doesn't he have to pay the price for killing so many humans in the past? Bane fell silent. In the end, this was the hero's true motive. The people of the world and the god's emissary were all incidental. He just had a personal grudge against Jilin and wanted to kill Jilin. In his opinion, the god of light had schemed against him, But he wasn't angry because he had also used the god of light. However, it was precisely such a selfish reason that made sense. Bane couldn't say anything to comfort him. He could mock and ridicule Lysana. However, he had nothing to say to the hero whose entire family had been unintentionally killed by Jilin. No matter what the hero did to kill Jilin, he could understand and accept it, even if it meant using others to die. Hence, Bane could only remain silent. "Are you worried about the Holy Daughter of Light?" the hero asked softly. "If I give her the Holy Sword, she will definitely fight Jilin. If Jilin doesn't stop and she dies, I will feel that I caused her death," Bane said softly, looking dispirited and aggrieved. "Why not let the Holy Daughter of Light make the choice herself?" The hero guided patiently. "Bring the sword to her. Let her decide whether to take it or not. Perhaps she won't take it. Perhaps she needs this power and is waiting for you to deliver it to her." Bane looked up, feeling that the hero's words made sense. Chapter 335. When you're trapped in a maze, you should naturally get out of it as soon as possible. But when you can't do it, you should take advantage of the situation and plan for the future. Bane couldn't get out of this maze of gods, humans, and Jilin by himself. It was like a sea full of fog, but Bane was sailing on it with a small boat. Maybe in his whole life, he couldn't pass through this fog, this sea. He had to think of a way, either change a boat or get on someone else's boat. But no matter what, he had to get out of this basement with no exit first. "Aisha!" Bane walked behind Aisha and called out softly. Aisha was still bent over the table and writing. Her posture was almost the same as before Bane left, as if she hadn't moved at all. Bane had never seen Aisha so serious and hardworking. In the past, no matter what Aisha faced, she would always have that playful attitude. It was really the first time that she was so serious about something. It made him a little uneasy, and he didn't dare to disturb Aisha. "What's the matter?" Aisha didn't turn her head. "When can we get out?" Bane pondered for a moment and said directly. He knew that the most convenient way to talk to Aisha was to be direct, because Aisha's eyes were like torches and seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. There was no use in hiding. Aisha finally stopped writing and moved her fingers to calculate the days. 25 days later, about 25 days. Bane suddenly frowned. The number of zeros made him feel a little strange. "Why is it 25? What do you think?" Aisha smiled and didn't say anything. "I want to go out," Bane said in a deep voice. "What? Did I not treat you well?" Aisha said perfunctorily. "That's not it," Bane said. "Do you have something else?" "Yes." "What is it? Can't you turn around and look at me?" "Tisk." Aisha turned around helplessly and was stunned, because Bane was holding that resplendent holy sword in his hand. Ew. Aisha stood up and looked at Bane with a dignified expression. She was about to say something. However, with her intelligence, she only needed one word to understand the cause and effect of the matter. However, no matter how intelligent Aisha was, there was still a problem that she didn't understand. How can you hold the holy sword? According to the hero's guess, anyone who has entered the spring of life can pick up the holy sword. Bane shrugged. But from what you said, you know that others can't pick up the holy sword? That's right. Aisha did not quibble. Do you think Hero and I are so coincidental? Arriving at Red Dragon City at about the same time? I followed them all the way here. I thought you came together. Bane was shocked. I'm a believer of the god of darkness, and Hero is the god of light's personal messenger. How can we be together? Aisha looked at Bane as if she was looking at an idiot. Bane was silent for a moment. Then, you tried to attack the holy sword on the way here with Hero. Of course. You fail. Of course. Hero didn't notice? How could I let him notice? Sister Aisha, you're awesome. Don't flatter me. I've heard enough of this from you over 100 years ago. You expose your age, Sister Aisha. Bane emphasized the word sister. Aisha looked at him with a gaze as sharp as a knife. Bane gulped. Sure enough, Aisha was the only one who could say her age. No matter how much she mocked herself, it was her own business. Once someone mentioned it, it would be very dangerous. What are you going to do with this sword? Aisha's tone became a lot harsher. What? Are you going to take over Hero's burden and fight Jilin? How is that possible? Bane's eyes widened. He thought to himself that Aisha was indeed Aisha. She easily brought up a possibility that he had never thought of. Oh. Aisha nodded. Then what are you going to do? Hero asked me to bring this sword to Staya, Bane said. Aisha was silent for a moment. You agree? Not at first and not now. Bane sighed. But I think Hero is right. Staya should have the right to choose. Now, this sword belonged to her. I'll bring it to her. If she wants to use it, I'll give it to her. If she doesn't want to use it, I'll find a cliff and throw the sword down. Ha! Aisha laughed. Do you know what's going on outside? You're isolated from the world. Of course, I don't know. Now that we've stolen the princess from Red Dragon City, Jilin is really anxious. He wants humans to hand her over. If they don't, he'll start an all-out war with humans. The time limit is 1 month. Bane gasped. He felt like a bucket of ice water was poured over his head. He felt cold from head to toe. It was as cold as a knife. Jilin was going to start an all-out war with humans. He was the fuse. The time limit was 1 month. 1 month. Isn't that the 25 days later you mentioned before? That's right. Then it's too late. No, the situation is clear now. What do you mean? Bane didn't understand. Wasn't the situation now clear enough? We're different from those humans who can only fight Jilin to the death. We have the right to choose our side. 1 month later, if humans win, we'll help them fight Jilin. If Jilin wins, we'll join Jilin and destroy humans. Aisha prettily looked like a wise woman who was strategizing. Isn't this a little too despicable? Even Bane, who was now known as Shadow, felt that it was a little despicable. One could only imagine how despicable this was. Most likely, as long as one was a human, they would not be able to do such a thing. This is called wisdom. Aisha obviously didn't think it was shameful. This is called hitting someone when they're down. That's for the losers. Aisha shook her head, as if she was lamenting Bane's naivety. For the winners, it's just icing on the cake. Icing on the cake is not as good as offering help. I know this better than you. This sentence means that, depending on the timing, even if you only pay a small price, you can get several times the usual return. But in this matter, there's a risk in providing timely help. We can't afford to take this risk, as it could easily cause our souls to scatter. It's better to be icing on the cake. It's a sure win. That doesn't seem to be what you mean, but what you said makes sense. Bane couldn't help but sigh. But we've already betrayed Jilin. Why would Jilin accept us again? If he wins, we won't be able to live, right? That's easy. Aisha seemed to have a card up her sleeve. We'll just return Lisana to him. Do you have a bottom line? What's the bottom line? Witches don't accept this concept. If Jilin wins, the Pope won't be able to escape death. Bane made a final move. The Pope was the only person he knew that Aisha truly valued. Chapter 336. Some people said that the older the secret, the more difficult it was to pry into it, because it was often hidden in the depths of darkness. One careless mistake, and you would be swallowed up by the darkness. In the darkness, killing intent was everywhere. What do you want? Bane's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Aisha looked at Bane, her eyes as sharp as knives, and her killing intent was like a knife. Ben felt as if there was a sharp knife coming at his face. It was so oppressive that he couldn't breathe. Aisha had never released her killing intent so directly to others. That was not her style, to fight and kill, to settle grudges. In Aisha's eyes, this was a bit too reckless. She liked to kill without spilling blood, so that people would not even know how they died. But Bane had really provoked her this time. Just as Bane's body was cold and his hands and feet were stiff, and he was about to collapse, and was considering whether to kneel and beg for mercy, Aisha finally snorted and turned her head away. Phew! Bane breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had survived a disaster. The two were silent for a long time, and Bane took a deep breath, looked at Aisha, and said seriously, "This war is what you wanted, right? You took Lisana away to infuriate Jilin. Why ask if you know?" "Why?" Bane said in a low voice. "I want to know why. Aisha, you have to know that what you are playing with is not child's play, but the lives of countless people. If Jilin is really angry, then it will be a real disaster. It's not that exaggerated. Aisha shrugged. The third prince proposed to fight Jilin one-on-one to determine the winner. There won't be too many casualties. Ha ha ha. Bane suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed. To be honest, Aisha really didn't want to pay attention to him because his laughter was too exaggerated. He wasn't laughing for the sake of laughing. He was laughing so that others would ask him, why did he laugh? Bane laughed for a long time, but Aisha didn't say anything. Bane had no choice but to stop laughing awkwardly. Sister Aisha, you have always been exceptionally intelligent. Your wisdom is feared by everyone on the continent. But now, why are you still deceiving yourself? Bane looked straight into Aisha's eyes, pressing forward. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid of Aisha, but he felt that compared to what they were discussing now, his life and dignity were insignificant. Deceive myself? Aisha was stunned. The duel between Jilin and the third prince is not a duel between the heroes of the Middle Empire that can be held behind closed doors. Their duel will affect the fate of all living beings in the world. The whole world will definitely witness it. At that time, if the third young master was defeated, would the human race just watch as their human emperor fell? On the other hand, if Jilin loses, will the dwarf race and the orc race just watch Jilin, who brought them hope and glory, be killed? No, they won't. No matter who wins or loses, the final battle is unavoidable. Lives will be lost. Aisha was silent for a moment. So what? Nothing, but I know that you're a person who doesn't do things without benefits. You won't do things that don't matter. But I hope that you can seriously think about it. Is your goal worth so many people sacrificing their lives for it? Aisha's eyes focused and said without hesitation, yes. Bane let out a long sigh of helplessness. There was no point in saying more. I want to give this sword to Staya. Can you let me go? Are you sure? Staya has the holy sword. She will definitely fight with Jilin in that battle. She will die. Things are different now. Jilin and the humans are in an all-out war. Staya is the saintess of the light. Even if she doesn't have the holy sword, she will lead the way. With the holy sword, she can at least protect herself. Aisha was silent. She turned back to her seat and stared at the map for a long time. Finally, she said slowly, yes. Can you let Lysana and the hero go? The hero is an insignificant person without the holy sword. He can leave whenever he wants. I don't care. What about Lysana? After a month, let's see who wins and who loses. If the third prince wins, she can leave too. What are the chances of the third prince winning? It's not easy to make a conclusion, but normally, the third prince's chances of winning are less than 10%. Bane wanted to curse. With a flash of purple light, Bane was teleported to the surface. He looked around and glanced at the sun in the west. He calculated the direction of the sacred city. Fortunately, he was still in the Saimai Empire. It wasn't too far from the sacred city, but he still had to find a small town and something to use as a means of transportation. Aisha's manor was very secluded, but it wasn't in a remote location. Bane finally found a town before the sky turned completely dark. Bane looked at the dark town in front of him and suddenly froze. The Saimai Empire's buildings were arranged in a picturesque manner on the ground. Stone walls and wooden roofs. The town wasn't big, so no matter which road he stood on, he could see the church in the center of the town. This was a characteristic of the Saimai Empire. No matter which Saimai Empire town, there would definitely be a church in the center. Bane should be very familiar with all of this. But the darkness in this town was something he wasn't familiar with. The people of the Saimai Empire who believed in the god of light would never let their houses fall into complete darkness. Even the poorest people would have a weak light in front of their door. Not to mention the Church of Light that worshipped the god of light. Basically, it was brightly lit. But now, only the Church of Light had a few weak lights. The rest of the place was pitch black. Bane walked towards the light in the dark. The road made of gravel under his feet was a little uneven. He walked past the dark houses on both sides of the road with mixed feelings. Not long after, Bane felt his way to the front of the church in the dark. A gate made of iron appeared in front of Bane. That was the gate of the church. Bane stretched out his hand and pushed lightly. With a creak sound, the door slowly moved open. The gate wasn't locked at all. This was normal. The doors of the church were never locked. Bane walked in, went up 2 steps, and walked to the gate of the church. Knock, knock, knock. Bane knocked on the door. Please come in. A heavy voice came from the door. It didn't even ask who it was. Bane stretched out his hand and pushed the door open. The wooden door was also unlocked. Bane lowered his head and walked in quietly. No matter what earth-shattering things they did outside, or how much knowledge they gained, the people of the Simi Empire still had an instinctive reverence for the Church of Light. This was an instinct engraved in their bones. The decorations in the church were similar. 2 rows of wooden benches were neatly arranged in the church. In front of the 2 rows of wooden benches was the same statue of the God of Light. A few lights were placed in front of the statue of the God of Light. They could only illuminate an area of 3 feet around the statue. In the first row of wooden benches on the left, a white-haired godfather sat. This godfather made people feel that he was in high spirits. His white hair was meticulously combed, and his back was straight. Half of him sat in the light, and the other half was in the dark. In his hand was a small pendant of the God of Light, and on his knee was a holy Bible of light. Bane was surprised. From the old man's attire, he should be the bishop of this church. It was rare to see this kind of person holding a holy Bible of light. This was because they could really recite it backwards. Hello, Bishop. Bane bowed. You are from the Simi Empire? The bishop's tone was somewhat suspicious. Yes. Bane lowered his head. But I don't know why you ask. Because I've been watching you since you came in, but I didn't feel any reverence for the God of Light. The bishop looked at Bane with a deep gaze. Chapter 337. The old bishop's eyes were as clear as the light, as if he had seen too much of the human world. It was as if he could see into the depths of a person's heart. Bane felt that he had been seen through. Under the old man's penetrating gaze, his heart seemed to be completely exposed. He really did not respect the God of Light. After all, he had started a scheme against humans, so why should he be polite to him? But he did not expect that he would be seen through at a glance in such a special place. Why do you say that? Bane's voice was slightly softer. The bishop rubbed the holy Bible of light in his hands. Although I am not very capable, I have spent most of my life in this church. I know very well what kind of state a person who believes in the God of Light from the bottom of his heart is in when he enters the Church of Light. You are very different from those people. You're not a local, are you? How do you know this? Bane was shocked, because during this period of time, the locals have already taken refuge in the East. Now, there are only a few people in this town. Is it because there's going to be a war? Maybe. The orders from above are not clear. Important matters have been covered up. They only express the order for the people to evacuate. The Simi Empire did not tell the people the truth. Bane thought to himself, then what are you still doing here? Protecting the Statue of Light. Do not let the statue of the God of Light fall into darkness. It could be very dangerous. Bane wanted to persuade the old man. He knew that although the old man sounded very powerful, such as protecting the Statue of Light, it was actually just lighting up a few lamps around the statue when it was dark. Other than wasting the energy to light the lamps, there was no practical purpose. It was not worth the old bishop taking the risk for this. But the old bishop did not say anything. He only shook his head. Bane understood and bowed to the old bishop in the Church of Light. That was his since elementary school. Perhaps everyone had something important that you were willing to give up your life for. Even if it was not worth mentioning in the eyes of others. Even if it was a little stupid. But you will do your best for them regardless of everything. And you will not regret it even to the point of death. The bishop nodded slightly. What brings you here? I'll have to trouble your eminence to stay here for the night, Bane said. There aren't many people in the church now. You can pick a room upstairs that you like. Thank you. There's no need for that. Even if the people don't believe in the God of Light, the God's radiance will still bless all living beings. Bane bowed, but in his heart, he disapproved. He thought that if the God of Light was really impartial, then the suffering in the world would be reduced by at least half. Late at night, the entire town was plunged into darkness, as if it had melted into the night. Dead silence. Bane stood by the window on the second floor of the church, overlooking the entire town. He felt as lonely as a reef in the sea. His heart was heavy. The third prince and Jilin were about to fight. Regardless of who would win or lose, countless people had already lost their homes before the fight even started. If the fight really started, there would probably be rivers of blood. How many innocent people would lose their lives and their families would be separated because of this in this silent night? At the same time, far away in the capital of the Middle Empire, there was another lively scene. Everywhere was decorated with lanterns and streamers. People walked on the streets with wine and food in their hands. Everyone's eyes were somewhat drunk. They were partying to their heart's content. It didn't matter if they were drunk or not. Today, the capital was brightly lit. In the deep dark night, it was as dazzling as a pearl. Because just 2 days ago, the current Golden King ordered the lifting of the curfew in the capital. This was one of the few times in the history of the Middle Empire. Although no one knew why it was lifted, but it was still worth the celebration of the people in the capital. The third prince stood at the highest point of the palace, looking down at the incomparably brilliant capital. He felt greatly relieved. Peace and prosperity were just like this. Unfortunately, if they were defeated a month later, all this glory would just be an attic in the sky. It would vanish in an instant. Well, just treat it as the last little seeking pleasure before the disaster came. If they could win, let the Middle Empire be like this every night. The third prince thought to himself. He put the wine jug in his hand on the stone railing and turned to leave. The golden dragon robe on his body looked very dignified under the waning lights of the palace. In the end, he was no longer the third prince of the past. 5 days later, the red disaster was now a disaster cloud hanging over the heads of all humans in the West. Everyone was waiting for him. Although there was still half a month before the war, all the major human factions had already gathered here. The most elite armies from all over the world had arrived in the Saimai Empire. The mobile city that had been renovated in the Saimai Empire many years ago was now ready. His Majesty the Human Emperor was working hard to give birth to a child in the capital. Humans had already used all their strength and methods to deal with the red disaster. Their gazes were all focused on the Gerda volcano to the west of the Saimai Empire. But what they didn't expect was that the red disaster that they feared was no longer in Red Dragon City. Even if Jilin didn't deliberately hide himself, no one could discover him. Jilin arrived at a barren mountain to the east of the Red Dragon Empire without anyone noticing. It was the mountain where the Water Dragon King's divine soul resided. Jilin violently broke through the Water Dragon King's restrictions and barged into the Water Dragon King's small world. He wanted to find the Water Dragon King and ask him what was going on. Although he had expected this, Jilin was still stunned when he saw the Water Dragon King's palace. Because in human terms, it could be described as empty. Although there wasn't anyone here, only a wisp of a soul. However, with Jilin's golden dragon eyes, he was able to instantly identify the differences between this place and the previous one. The Water Dragon King's remnant soul wasn't here. Jilin's eyes shone with golden light, revealing his sharpness. Logically speaking, a dragon's divine soul shouldn't be able to move. But the Water Dragon King was the king of the dragon race when he was alive. It was reasonable for him to be able to do things that ordinary dragons couldn't. Moreover, Jilin also knew that his bloodline inheritance had been modified by his parents. It seemed to be different from ordinary dragon inheritance and wasn't reliable. Perhaps a dragon's divine soul could move, but his parents wanted him to think that it couldn't move. In short, the Water Dragon King's divine soul was gone. He was already dead, so there shouldn't be anything he could do. He could only hide. And in this world, there should only be one creature that the Water Dragon King needed to hide from, and that was him. The Water Dragon King was hiding from him. Jilin made this judgment and felt even angrier, because he didn't have the confidence to find the Water Dragon King in this vast world. After all, the Water Dragon King had a lot of experience and was much more familiar with the place. But at this moment, Jilin looked at the Water Dragon King's residence and thought of something. The monk could run away, but the temple couldn't. Chapter 338. The monk can run, but the temple can't run. This sentence is definitely correct, because the monk has legs, but the temple doesn't. This is nonsense. However, humans had the ability to turn nonsense into meaningful words. Jilin nodded, feeling that he has discovered another ability of humans. Of course, the so-called temple is definitely not the place where Jilin is standing. It is the place where the dragon soul of the Water Dragon King should be resting. Dragon bones. The dragon bones of the Water Dragon King. Humph. Jilin snorted and flapped his wings, turning into a flame that soared into the sky. Southern Exan Empire, in the depths of the mountains, the grass is lush and the forest is deep. A giant bear covered in dark golden patterns is lowering its head to gnaw on the corpse of an elk, biting until it is dripping with blood. It is very engrossed, forgetting everything. The giant bear's teeth and the bones of the elk rub together, making a teeth-numbing creaking sound. The forest is filled with the smell of blood. Suddenly, a slight vibration came from under the giant bear's body. The giant bear is startled and looks at the ground. The vibration is getting stronger and stronger. Small stones and gravel begin to jump on the ground. The giant bear decisively throws the elk's corpse to the side, gets on all fours, and runs with all its strength. In an instant, the silent forest suddenly becomes noisy. Flocks of birds soar, covering the sky. 10,000 beasts rush, the earth quakes, and the mountains shake. Countless animals come out from unknown corners of the forest, running out with all their might. Behind the animals, the shaking ground began to crack open, and scorching flames burst out from the cracks. It is like an underground volcano without a crater is about to erupt. The trees are ignited by the fire coming out from the ground. The entire forest begins to burn. The terrifying heat spread across the earth. Then there is a loud bang. The earth is lifted for a moment. Gravel fills the sky. A fireball the size of a small mountain rushes out from the ground. Jilin flies into the air to observe the terrain. He has no idea where this is, but Jilin is sure that it is not the Red Dragon Empire. Because with the terrain of the Red Dragon Empire, Jilin can't see the sea from this height. It can't be the Snow Wind Empire, because there is no snow here. Oh, it's the Nanshin Empire. Jilin glanced towards the south and understood. From Jilin's point of view, the southern side was filled with yellow sand that blotted out the sky. Obviously, it was the wasteland. Strictly speaking, it was his territory now. A roar came from below Jilin's body. Jilin looked down and found that there was a raging fire burning below him. Looking at the creatures running for their lives in the forest, Jilin realized that the number of creatures in a forest was not less than the number of humans in a city. Jilin's golden dragon eyes flashed with golden light, and the raging flames in the forest were instantly extinguished. It was as if he had never existed. All that was left were the charred branches, grass, and the charred bodies of the animals that did not manage to escape in time. It seemed to prove that the fire just now was not an illusion. Jilin's face turned gloomy, like the dark clouds before a storm. He didn't feel that he had killed innocent people, but he felt guilty that so many creatures had died because of him. He just felt that the Water Dragon King's matter seemed to be more troublesome. The entrance of the Water Dragon King's stone palace was in the Red Dragon Empire, but the actual location was in the Nanshin Empire. Old Fox, with the Water Dragon King's power when he was alive, he shouldn't have used such a scheme. But he still used it. Did this mean that it was his hobby? A Dragon King who liked to play tricks. Thinking about it, he felt that he didn't know where to start. Jilin turned and flew towards the east. In less than half a day, Jilin arrived at the original site of Ping Foam Pass, which was now deep in the sea. Jilin landed on the city wall of Calm Wind Pass, which was exposed above the sea, and looked down at the sea. The deep sea and the large amount of sand at the bottom of the sea could not block Jilin's golden vision. Jilin could see the complicated lines hidden under the water and sand. That was the Ping Foam Formation. The Water Dragon King's dragon bones were hidden in it. If the Water Dragon King didn't lie to him. Of course, Jilin also felt that the Water Dragon King wouldn't lie to him about this. After all, to suppress the rise of such a vast sea, there was no other way except for the dragon bones. Lin took out the dragon scale sword, which was already a huge red sword. Now it was as big as a mountain ridge. It made Lin seem small. Lin roared and used all his strength to swing the dragon scale sword downwards with the hilt of his sword. It was really a sword that could split mountains and seas. Because this sword was big enough. With just one sword, Lin split the sea. After thousands of years, the sand at the bottom of the sea was exposed to the blue sky for the first time. The Ping Fong Pass that the kingdom of the sacred dragon was so proud of was like nothing in front of this sword. In an instant, it collapsed. However, Lin did not stop there. Instead, he continued to hack down with his sword. His target was the Ping Fong Formation hidden under the ground. Each of Lin's sword had the power to split the earth. Under his sword, a deep trench appeared at the bottom of the sea. It grew longer and deeper, just as Lin lost count of how many times he had swung the dragon scale sword. A white light finally appeared from the ground. Lin heaved a rare sigh of relief. He felt a little tired. He glanced at the dragon scale sword in his hand, which had returned to its original size. He thought to himself that this weapon was still useful. Lin turned into a meteor and fell into the crevice, colliding with the white light. The white and red lights shone brightly and intertwined, crushing each other. Boom! There was a loud sound and the sea started to shake. Huge waves were everywhere. Finally, Lin rushed into the Ping Fong Formation. The white light slowly extinguished. When Lin came out again, he held the dragon scale sword in one hand and a huge skeleton bigger than him in the other. It was glowing with a faint blue light. The Water Dragon King's dragon bone. Lin flew west for a distance and threw the dragon bone at the peak of a mountain in the sky. The huge dragon bone landed on the mountain top, destroying countless trees in the forest and startling countless birds. The most exaggerated thing was that 2 mountains had collapsed under the weight of the mountain. "Please come out, Your Excellency Water Dragon King." Lin pointed at the dragon bone and shouted in a deep voice. His gaze was sharp and he was full of confidence. He had already found the temple and would definitely find the monk. However, there was no movement from the dragon bone. The air was filled with an awkward atmosphere. Lin waited for a long time, but there was no movement. Finally, Lin frowned. He could not help it. Lin flew to the side of the dragon bone. His arm moved slightly, and a sword beam flashed. A scratch immediately appeared on the Water Dragon King's flawless dragon bones. The scratch was not big. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to see it. However, this was a dragon bone. Its hardness should be unparalleled in the world. Nothing could damage it. However, Lin used the dragon scale sword in his hand to leave a scratch on it. This meant that Lin now had the ability to injure the Dragon King and even kill it. Lin looked at the scratch and was very proud. He nodded slightly. "Don't think that I can't do anything to you if you don't make a sound. If you don't come out, I'll break the dragon bone for you." Sigh, young people nowadays. Chapter 339. The sudden voice startled Lin. He immediately reacted. This was the Water Dragon King's voice. "Lord Water Dragon King, you have been in the human world for too long. The human's influence on you seems to have seeped into your bones." The blue light emitted by the blue skeleton became stronger, and countless blue light spots flew out of the skeleton. They floated in the air. They were like stars in the sky, and they were very beautiful. They looked like blue fireflies. The countless blue fireflies gathered and gradually formed a blue image. It was the Water Dragon King's dragon soul. "Why do you say that?" The Water Dragon King looked at Lin. The Water Dragon King did not say anything like "long time no see." Considering the long lifespan of the dragon race, the two of them should have just parted. "Earlier, you said that I was young, but I am not human." Lin shook his head slightly. "From his perspective, you're not qualified to say that." Lin felt stunned. He thought about his recent words and actions and suddenly felt that the Water Dragon King was right. How is Lisa recently? The first person the Water Dragon King mentioned in the conversation with Lin was the black-haired princess of the Divine Dragon Empire. "I lost her." At the mention of this, Lin felt somewhat angry. Bane and Aisha stole her. Bane? Aisha? Bane is the human who met you with me last time. Aisha is a witch. The Water Dragon King immediately sank into deep silence. What is the relationship between that woman and you? Is it worth it for you to remember it even after death? Unexpectedly, you took back my dragon bones in the end. The Water Dragon King looked to the east and ignored Jilin. He sighed and said, "It looks like our previous conversation was not of much use. The calming wind formation has completely collapsed. Because I can't completely trust you with what you've done. Since you do not trust me, why did you go through so much trouble to meet me? Because this time, it is not a meeting or a conversation. I'm here to force a confession. Now, if I ask you anything, you'd better answer me truthfully. If I find out that you lied to me, I'll break your bones." Jilin's tone was calm and could even be said to be humble and polite. But now, he was using the most polite tone to say the most arrogant words. Even the Water Dragon King didn't know what to do. You, a descendant of the Dragon Clan, actually want to dismantle the former Dragon King's bones. Treacherous. Senior, you've been in the human world for too long. Jilin rolled his eyes at the Water Dragon King. We dragons don't care about that. But we have the Dragon Clan's rules. Don't you have them in your bloodline inheritance? Huang, you trash. Senior Water Dragon King, although I agree with what you said, humans say that it is rude to scold one's father. Jilin silently used the dragon scale sword to draw a line on the dragon bone. Furthermore, I'm tearing apart your dragon bone, so it doesn't count as fratricidal. After all, you're already dead. Now answer me. What does she have to do with you? The Water Dragon King thought for a moment and said, an old friend's descendant. That's nonsense. Jilin's sword flashed, and the mark became more obvious. The Water Dragon King's soul shook violently. Then, a surge of dragon aura surged out. Even Jilin felt some pressure. Little guy, do you think you can threaten a great Dragon King? The Dragon King is already dead. Jilin was unmoved. Is there a human dragon's son or not? Are you insulting me? The Water Dragon King was clearly angry. For a Dragon Clan member who committed suicide, no matter how vicious the words are, they are not enough to be insulted. Jilin's sharpness in his words could be considered top-notch among humans. The Water Dragon King was speechless. After a long silence, he slowly said, "When you experience what I experienced, you will understand." Jilin shook his head, obviously disapproving. "Tell me, is there a human dragon's son or not?" "No." At this moment, the Water Dragon King was very straightforward. The difference between humans and dragons is like the difference between clouds and mud. How can there be a human dragon's son? Jilin still did not believe it. I met a human godson in the human race. It is said that he is the descendant of the war god. The difference between gods and humans is just as great. Humans and gods are an exception. Why? Because gods created humans. Jilin remained silent for a while. In that short instant, countless dark and disgusting guesses flashed in his mind. Jilin agreed with the Water Dragon King's words. Then, what is your relationship with the Divine Dragon Empire's royal family? Why are you so concerned? They are the inheritors of my power. You just said that there can't be a human dragon's son. Jilin was greatly startled. Fool! The Water Dragon King glared at Jilin. For the dragon race, the inheritance of power is never limited to reproduction. What else is there? What is the inheritance that the dragon race is best at? What? It is bloodlines. The Water Dragon King looked at Jilin like a human looking at a junior who did not know how to read. Although the Water Dragon King had not given up completely, he did not have much hope. Bloodline inheritance. Such an obvious thing, but the Water Dragon King did not think of it. Even Jilin felt somewhat ashamed. He could not raise his head. Then he reacted. You did something to their bloodlines? Yes. Humans have short lifespans. If I only did it to one person, it would be useless. Only by changing their bloodlines can I do it once and for all. What did you do? I hid the dragon race's power in their bloodlines. You gave the dragon race's power to humans? Jilin shouted. Flames of rage burned fiercely above his head. Yes. Why? Jilin's dragon tail suddenly smashed down, shattering the mountain peak. "You will understand," the Water Dragon King said in a deep tone. Jilin was stunned. The Water Dragon King's attitude caught him off guard. Jilin was silent for a long time. Then, word by word, he said, "The dragon race's power cannot fall into the hands of outsiders, not even a little bit." "You are right," the Water Dragon King said. "You have almost destroyed the God-sealing formation, right?" Jilin felt a little confused. He could not keep up with the Water Dragon King's stiff change of topic. "I can feel that the 5 formation eyes of the God-sealing formation have been broken. The dragon race's wind-calming formation. The god race's soul puppet. The naturally formed volcanoes. The demon race's sand curtain. Only the dark god race's ice field is still lingering." The Water Dragon King's voice was deep and ancient. It was full of vicissitudes, as if it contained tens of thousands of years of time. "Why are you talking about this?" Jilin did not understand. "I am asking you about the dragon race's power. The stronger the race, the more they do not want their power to flow out. The dragon race is the same, and so is the god race. But there are still people who can use divine power. The light gods, the dark gods. Do you find it contradictory?" The Water Dragon King looked at the sea in the distance. His eyes were so deep that it seemed to contain the entire sea. Jilin felt like he was talking to a delirious person. What was this? There was no logic at all. He did not understand at all. However, Jilin at least understood one thing, and that was that the Water Dragon King had indeed divided the power of the Dragon Clan. Chapter 340. Does that human woman also have the power of the dragon race in her body? Jilin asked solemnly. "Yes. Why can't I see it?" For the first time, Jilin doubted his golden eyes. "Of course, it is not that easy for humans to use the power of the dragon race," the Water Dragon King said. "Before the power of the dragon race awakens, it will only hide in the human bloodline, no different from ordinary people. How many royal families of the Divine Dragon Empire are left in this world?" Jilin asked. "How would I know?" The Water Dragon King asked. "You gave your power to the humans, but you don't know where they are?" Jilin did not believe it. "I'm already dead," the Water Dragon King reminded. "All right." Jilin believed it. "I'm going to move your dragon bones away. Since I've already dug them out, I can't allow them to be left outside." "I didn't expect you to dig out my dragon bones so quickly." The Water Dragon King found it somewhat strange. Sometimes, even the dragon race can borrow some external help. Jilin showed the dragon scale sword to the Water Dragon King with a smug expression. "Why did you think of getting a sword to use? The dragon race doesn't have this habit." The Water Dragon King glanced sideways. Jilin silently raised the Water Dragon King's skeleton, not saying anything. He could not say that he wanted to get one purely, because he thought that humans looked cool when using it, right? "What is this sword made of?" The Water Dragon King looked at the scratch on his arm. "All sorts of rare ores," Jilin said. "That's not enough to leave a mark on my bones. There are also my nails and teeth." "Oh, that's pretty good, but it's still not enough. You should have a god spirit." "God spirit?" The Water Dragon King was startled. "Why do you have a god spirit?" "The god race looks at god spirit as well as we look at dragon bones. Didn't you say that the god race had a god spirit puppet here? You destroyed the god race's backup plan." "What backup plan?" "Nothing. You have to remember not to let the god race see this sword. They will fight you to the death." "Afraid of them?" Jilin pursed his lips. This aura really lives up to the name of the Dragon Clan. The Water Dragon King shook his head. The true God-sealing formation has already been formed. The creatures outside this world still can't enter. However, the Dark God race has made the first move. Be careful. The Dark God race will make a move soon. What does this have to do with me? Jilin was stunned. "You." The Water Dragon King was stunned. "Sigh. Huang, you bastard." The Water Dragon King sighed and cursed the Fire Dragon King. Then, his spirit slowly dissipated. No matter how Jilin called out, he didn't make a sound. Jilin was confused. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He didn't understand a lot of what the Water Dragon King said. This place was near the sea. To Jilin, it was very close to Divine Dragon City. Jilin stored the dragon bone in his small world and flew to Divine Dragon City. When Jilin arrived above Divine Dragon City, he narrowed his eyes. If not for his absolute confidence in the route, he would have thought that he took the wrong path. Divine Dragon City, which used to be a normal city, now looked completely different. The outer walls of Divine Dragon City were completely painted red. The red city walls looked very lofty on the ground. Jilin frowned when he saw this. He could not understand the humans' ever-changing aesthetic standards. Jilin looked at the Divine Dragon Empire's former palace below. Now, it should be the Red Dragon Church's holy palace. Your Holiness the Pope, I need you to personally deal with the sea race's king, a red-robed old man said as he bowed. Bang! Flay slammed the table and stood up. Deal with it? How am I supposed to deal with it? I don't have a dragon knight. I can't defend against the sea race. The old man did not dare to say anything else. Damn it, why do I still have so many problems after conquering an empire? We have Lord Dragon God protecting us. Tell the sea race not to be too impudent. What's the matter? What does the sea race want to do? Jilin silently appeared behind Flay. Then, he casually found the largest seat and sat down. Who is it? Come down. The red-robed old man shouted. His eyes brimmed with murderous intent. That was the Red Dragon Church's divine seat. Normally, even Flay would not sit on it. This seat symbolized the equality of all life. The Red Dragon Church's doctrine that only God existed above people's heads. The Red Dragon Church was a church-state, not an empire. There was no emperor, only a pope. When people saw the pope, they did not need to kneel. Legally, the pope did not have the authority to execute anyone. Hence, that seat was a supreme divine seat in the hearts of the Red Dragon Church's followers. One could only look and not sit on it. Whoever sat on it would die. Dense fire elements gathered in the old man's hand. It was obvious that he wanted to cast some kind of spell. Fortunately, the old man took a look at Flay before he attacked. After all, the old man was a legendary expert. It was a good habit to take a look at the strongest person before attacking. The fire elements gathered in the old man's hand instantly dissipated. The old man's body stiffened, and he was dumbfounded. This was because he saw Flay kneel down. Flay's head was also very low. She did not see the old man at all. Only then did the old man turn his head stiffly and look at Jilin. The old man saw the head of red hair clearly. Red Dragon God, the old man shouted, prostrating himself on the ground. In the hearts of the Red Dragon Church's followers, Jilin was the only living god. Furthermore, he was the only god that actually helped his followers. He made the Divine Dragon Empire lose its dragon knights, break through Calm Wind Pass, and break through Divine Dragon City. The other gods only gave their followers a kind of faith. However, Jilin directly helped his followers change their fates. Although he did not do it intentionally, Jilin's fanatical followers still filled the entire Red Dragon Church. Welcome, Red Dragon God, Flay said loudly. Yes. Jilin nodded. What did you say about the sea race earlier? Nothing. It's just a small matter. It is not worth the Red Dragon God's concern. Really? Let me ask you something. Please tell me. Where did the Divine Dragon Empire's royal family go? Most of them died defending Divine Dragon City when it fell. Most of them, a small portion abandoned the city and fled. They fled? Where are they now? I don't know. Jilin frowned slightly. Lord Dragon God, the nobles who abandoned the city and fled are not a cause for concern. It's fine. Jilin raised his hand to indicate to Flay that there was no need to panic. Do you know who the people who fled were? I do, Flay said with certainty. Before overthrowing the Divine Dragon Empire, the Red Dragon Church had planted many spies in the Divine Dragon Empire. While they did not know the Divine Dragon Empire's royal family members well, they knew who they were. What is this empire called now? Jilin asked. The Red Dragon Church, Flay replied. The church, is this country under your control now? No, it is under your control. There's no need to stand on ceremony. I just want to know if you can find the people of the Divine Dragon Empire's royal family. Jilin spoke very slowly, as if he was afraid that she could not hear him clearly. Flay thought for a while. As long as they have not left the Red Dragon Church, I can find them. However, I will need time. Sure. Jilin nodded. What he did not lack the most was time. Find them and kill them. Eliminate them completely. Yes. Chapter 341. Jilin said to find the people and kill them. Flay did not say anything and only replied, yes. Humans did not need to question the god's orders. They only needed to act according to the orders. Red Dragon God, I heard that you are about to start a war against the allied army of the four nations. Flay said, Amen. Jilin muttered to himself. Although the current situation was that the third prince wanted to fight him one-on-one, in the end, it would definitely become a large-scale war. Thus, this was not wrong. Humans were not wild beasts. They would not listen to you just because you killed the strongest one. It was not that simple. That's right. Jilin agreed with Flay's words. How should our red dragon theocracy act? I hope that the red dragon god will give us instructions, Flay said. You only need to be responsible for finding the people. Jilin stood up. As for the rest, you don't need to worry about it. But mere humans are not worth mentioning. Do you think that I will lose? The red dragon god will definitely be invincible, Flay hurriedly said. After not seeing any movement for a long time, Flay carefully raised her head and sized up the surroundings. She discovered that there was no one in the surroundings. A cool breeze blew into the room. The white muslin curtains by the window fluttered in the wind. The window was already opened. Flay stood up and wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. What exactly does the oceanic race want? They want to obtain the ability to move about on land. What's the point of telling us this? They want to send a message to the Red Dragon God through us. Why didn't you say anything when the Red Dragon God was here? This subordinate did not dare. Flay did not say anything. She could understand the red-robed old man's feelings at that time. It was normal for him to be unable to say anything. Tell the oceanic race to stop causing trouble for now. The Red Dragon God is about to start a war against the allied army of the four nations. This is a crucial moment. I will find an opportunity to tell the Red Dragon God about their matters after the war. Yes. Also, seize the time to organize the army. What for? Our geographical location is very good. When the allied army of the four nations starts fighting the Red Dragon God, we might be able to find an opportunity to deal a fatal blow to the allied army. This is such a great contribution. But didn't the Red Dragon God just say, that's because the Dragon God hasn't completely trusted us yet. In his eyes, we are also human beings, just like the four-nation coalition. Could it be that it isn't? Yes, but our positions are different. But we're all humans, but the Red Dragon God will win. Understood. The passage of time in the blink of an eye. More than half a month had passed. The time agreed upon by Jilin and the third prince was approaching. Seeing that a war that would determine the life and death of mankind was about to begin, there was an oppressive atmosphere everywhere. However, only the capital of the Middle Empire was still beaming with joy. No, it should be said that it was even livelier than when the third prince lifted the curfew. Even the 2 rows of brothels on the red light district offered a half-price discount. This was truly unprecedented in the Middle Empire. This was because in the past few days, a joyous event had happened in the Middle Empire. The current emperor, the Golden King, had a descendant. The empress was successfully pregnant with a dragon's seed, and the Golden King used the power of the human emperor to confirm that it was a prince. The news spread like wildfire, and the entire Middle Empire was jubilant. The older sisters on the red light district were even happier. After all, the third prince was the first emperor to walk out of the red light district, and the older sisters were proud. While the outside was jubilant, the inside of the palace was different. Even though there was a prince, it couldn't hide the oppressive atmosphere of the Golden King's impending expedition. The third prince was wearing golden armor and sitting on the throne. His face was expressionless, and there was an unfathomable depth in his eyes. Below the throne, the prime minister was discussing various matters of the army with a few ministers, making a racket. Today was the day that the third prince was about to head to the Simi Empire. The third prince looked at the sky outside the palace. There was clearly nothing in front of him, but it also seemed like the entire world was there. Now, there were no more worries. He was the strongest emperor of the human race, and also the strongest warrior of the human race. It was time for him to set off. There were only two outcomes. First, he defeated Jilin and turned into a shield to block the storm for the entire human race. Second, he would be the warrior at the forefront of the human race and lead the entire human race to charge and break through enemy lines. Either he would ride the wind and break the waves, or he would live and die together. But no matter what, the human race would definitely suffer a great loss. South of the Saimai Empire, a lone figure was silently traversing the grassland, leaving behind a trail that belonged only to him on the boundless green land. Huff! Huff! Bane pushed aside the grass that reached his waist and trudged through the grass with difficulty. Only now did Bane realize the greatness of the Empire. At least the territory of the Empire was huge. Aisha's manor was also within the Sacred Empire, but it was still a long distance away from the Sacred City. Although Bane was now a powerhouse of the 6th level, it was still difficult for him to travel such a long distance alone. The people of the Saimai Empire had all moved to the east or the north as much as possible. To put it simply, they were fleeing for their lives. And what they needed the most was a means of transportation. All the vehicles and livestock had been taken away by the large number of people of the Saimai Empire. Bane walked for a long time, but he didn't even see a single mount. He suddenly realized a terrifying thing. He might not make it in time. He might not make it in time to give the sacred sword to Staya before the battle began. This road was too King long for him to walk on foot alone. Bane lowered his head and sighed. He looked up at the sun, and his heart sank. The clouds were very thick today, but the sun could still be seen. But at night, the stars might not be visible. This meant that he wouldn't be able to travel tonight. Because he couldn't see the stars, he wouldn't be able to tell the direction. In the vast grassland, once he went in the wrong direction, it would cause a huge consequence. In Aisha's manor, there was an underground room without an exit. A lamp was lit faintly, illuminating a desk. From the dimness of the light, the owner of the desk didn't seem to care about the visual impairment at all. All kinds of drawing tools were scattered around the desk, as if they were casually thrown away after being used up. A huge map was spread out on the desk, and all kinds of complicated lines were drawn on it. An eye-catching red dot dotted the map. Aisha looked at the dot, and her eyes shone brightly. She was so excited that she couldn't control her breathing. Her face was red, and she was mumbling. Finally, after such a long time. So, it was here, no wonder, damn the Church of Light, huh? A week later, it was the day that Jilin and the third prince agreed to meet. In Red Dragon City, Jilin stretched himself on the Golden Mountain. He wagged his tail and seemed to be in a good mood. Finally, under Bat-Tel's reminder, Jilin remembered what day it was. It was the day that he was going to duel with the third prince. Jilin laughed disdainfully in his heart. What duel? It was just giving him face. A battle where victory or defeat was certain wasn't a duel. It was a massacre and a suicide mission. Jilin lazily flew out of the largest volcano in Red Dragon City and landed in front of the city. Smoke and dust rose, and the ground shook. Jilin waved the dust away, and he was stunned, because there were humans everywhere in front of him. When they stood together, they were like a black sea that covered the earth and connected the sky. The ground was full of people. Chapter 342. Most of the time, a quantitative increase would lead to a qualitative change. When a number of humans was large enough, they would have the courage to look down on everything. However, when they saw Jilin's mythical body, no matter how many companions they had, they could not help but feel fear. It's the red disaster, so it's true, don't panic. Don't be afraid. There are quite a lot of people. Jilin looked at the endless crowd outside the volcano and sighed. No matter how many humans there are, it's nothing to worry about. Singh had already walked to Jilin's side. He was fully armed. Orcs with dwarven equipment can help the Beast King win all the victories in the world. Jilin turned his head and looked behind him. He nodded slightly. Behind him, there was also an army of thousands of men and horses. They did not lose to anyone in terms of aura. Jilin did not know how many people there were on his side, nor did he know how many humans there were. When 100,000 people stood together, It was an endless stretch. No matter how many there were, there would not be any difference. Let's go. Jilin transformed into his human form and walked side by side with Sing. Yes, Sing shouted loudly. Beastmen advance. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Golden King, the red camp is moving. The warlord's eyesight was naturally very good. The third prince nodded slightly. I saw it too. Brother Long's army is mainly made up of orcs and elemental creatures. The warlord and the Shengming king have dealt with these two the most. Therefore, I'll leave the close combat to you two. No problem. The warlord nodded. That's how it should be, the Shengming king said. Whether or not we can avenge our humiliation will depend on today. Brother Long's army's long-range attack must be the dwarves. I'll leave this to the Iron Blood King. Is that okay? The third prince asked. Okay. The Iron Blood King was resolute. The Middle Empire's golden warships and all other long-range weapons will be under the command of the Iron Blood King, the third prince said. All right. The Iron Blood King didn't say anything else. The third prince glanced at the warlord and the Shengming king, wondering what was going on with the Iron Blood King when the battle was about to begin. The warlord and the Shengming king only gave him a knowing look. The third prince nodded. All right, since Brother Long has already made his move, let's go up and meet him. The third prince had just taken a step when he was pulled back by the Shengming king. We can't go up now. If we go up now, we will meet near the border between Mount Gerda and the Saimai Empire. When the real battle begins, once the army charges, our vanguard will easily charge into the range of the volcano. Not even at the edge of the volcano. The third prince was stunned. That's no ordinary volcano. The name Forbidden Land of Life is not just for show. The Shengming king rolled his eyes at the Golden King. He knew that the Golden King had been to the depths of the volcano alone before, so of course, he wouldn't care about the edge of the volcano. The third prince had the potential to be a wise ruler. He didn't have the hobby of making arbitrary decisions, and he followed good advice. Since the Shengming king has said so, then we will listen to you. The army will not move for now. The third prince reached behind him. Prime Minister, give me the thing. I will go and meet Brother Long alone. Zhuge Zhang, who was behind the third prince, hesitated for a moment, but in the end he took out a jar of wine and placed it in the third prince's hand. Your Majesty, be careful. Don't worry. The third prince took it and walked toward Jilin's army. His posture was extremely relaxed, as if he wasn't on the battlefield, but strolling on the third floor of Spring Breeze Restaurant. I will go with you. Staya stepped forward. Forget it. The third prince didn't even turn his head. If you go with me, it will be like we were surrendering. Golden King, what do you mean? Staya was furious. She took out the hammer of victory and wanted to hit the back of the third prince's head. The third prince was no longer the same as before. He could take this hit. Pull the same back. The Pope spoke. Suddenly, 5 or 6 people pounced on her. Some pulled her clothes, while others pulled her arms. After a Herculean effort, they finally held down the Saint of the Light. Staya. Jilin led the army forward, but the humans didn't move until the third prince walked out of the crowd. Jilin walked to the border between the volcano and the grassland. He signaled for the army to stop and walked forward alone. Soon, Jilin met the third prince. Brother long time no see. The third prince looked at Jilin and the countless beasts and fire elemental creatures behind him. It felt like a lifetime had passed. Huh? Jilin was stunned. Didn't we just see each other a few days ago? For the dragons, who had a long lifespan, a month could be described as the snap of a finger. Besides, the army behind the third prince was nothing to him except for the fact that it was huge. Come, Brother Long, let's drink. The third prince raised the wine jar in his hand. This is your favorite wine, double steamed. You haven't drunk it in a long time, right? Drinking before a fight? Jilin tilted his head. Are you humans crazy? Let's drink some. The third prince opened the wine jar, took a sip, and handed it to Jilin. This is how humans feel. Brother Long, you still have to learn. Learn my ass. Jilin took the wine jar. Can't you bring 2 jars? Do I have to drink your leftovers? It's good enough that you have something to drink. The third prince shook his head and sighed. Brother Long, When you helped me ascend the throne, did you ever think that this day would come? Predicting the future is not the power of the dragons. Jilin said, I also didn't expect that you could become like this today. You dare to face so many beasts alone. You do have the aura that you humans described of going forward despite thousands of enemies. I'm just forcing it. The third prince shook his head and ignored Jilin's mockery. I'm representing the Middle Empire now. I can't lose face in front of so many people. Actually, my legs are weak. I've never seen so many beasts before. I can't help it. Run if you want to. Jilin finished the wine in the jar. This is the last time. Run now? How can that be? The third prince shook his head. Brother Long, I can't find that princess. Can you give me a few more days? I know you can't find her. You'll never find her if you keep looking, Jilin said. It seems that a fight between you and me is inevitable, the third prince said. It's just a fight. Why do you need so many people to watch? Because the stakes of this fight between you and me are half of the human race's world. Moreover, according to the rules of the martial arts world, a fight between masters should be watched. And the higher the level, the more people will watch. For masters like you and me, it's only right for millions of people to watch. That makes sense. Brother Long, do you remember my small courtyard in the Middle Empire? Yes, I have a photographic memory. Sometimes I think that this door really can't be pushed blindly. Sometimes life can be completely changed because of a door. It's useless to talk about the past. It's also not the power of the dragon race to change the past. Stop it, Brother Long. It's just a human. There's no need to put people in a terrible situation, right? No. If we can't find it, you can't find it either. Maybe then I won't need to find it. Moreover, it's not just about humans, right? You're still thinking about our land? I gave you this grassland. Do you want it? Those elemental creatures under your command are all on fire. If they walk on the grassland, the entire grassland will be on fire. Why do you care? Even if the elemental creatures can't use it, there are still the beasts and dwarves. Why do you humans have all the good land? Is it because you're stronger than the other races? If that's the case, we are stronger than you now. Please give up your land. The third prince took a deep breath, thinking to himself, this is probably what it means to be stubborn. Damn it, Chief Dragon, if not for you, there wouldn't be so many major events in this world. The third prince said seriously as he looked at Jilin. How many years have the 5 human empires kept each other in check? The moment you came out, the Divine Dragon Empire is gone. Can't you just have a good night's sleep? Jilin looked at the third prince without saying anything. There was no point in saying anything more. All right, then. The third prince drew the sword at his waist, and a clear dragon roar resounded. Brother Long, be careful. Humans are very despicable. I already knew that. The sword in the third prince's hand became increasingly dazzling. Gradually, the sky was dyed golden. The third prince seemed to be holding a small sun. Huh! The third prince shouted, and a golden light soared into the sky, turning into a pillar of light that shot into the sky. This pillar of light was so huge that it illuminated more than half of the world. It's just a bluff. Jilin smiled. However, he was immediately stunned. This was because he could see through his golden eyes that the entire world had changed. It had become submissive to the third prince. He had changed. The third prince had really changed. The power of the human emperor could command the world. Was this the power of the king of the strongest race in the world? Jilin knew that he would never be able to obtain this power because he was an outsider in this world. Nothing in the world could ever help him. Fortunately, Jilin did not need it. Jilin took out the dragon scale sword and transformed back into his true form, standing proudly between heaven and earth. The mountains and rivers seemed insignificant before him. The Megalosaurus held the divine sword in his hand. That power alone was enough to fight against the entire world. A huge phantom appeared behind Jilin. It was several times larger than Jilin. That was Jilin himself. The patterns on each of his scales could be clearly seen. The world would not help Jilin, but he could force the world to bow its head. The power of the world could be used regardless of whether it was given or snatched. Jilin flew into the sky and raised the dragon scale sword. The sword wind howled, cutting through mountains and seas. The third prince's eyes focused. A golden figure appeared behind the third prince. It was the same size as him and held a spear in its hand. Jilin was taken aback. He focused his gaze and realized that the silhouette wasn't third young master. Who was it? Jilin did not know either. However, Jilin was no longer confused because more figures appeared behind the third prince. 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, until there was no end. Behind Jilin was himself. Behind the third prince were countless people. It was a dazzling sight. As the human emperor, the third prince himself was the spark of this world. The third prince stabbed his sword at Jilin, who was in the air. The countless figures behind the third prince moved at the same time. Their actions were in sync with the third prince. Countless people launched an attack at Jilin, including the third prince's sword. Bam! There was a loud sound. Jilin's body stiffened, and he fell to the ground. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 343. Jilin was dumbfounded. He didn't understand what was going on. How could this be? The third prince only swung his sword across the air. There was no light blade, nor was there any earth-shattering aura. His movements were calm and slow, like an old man training his body with a sword in the morning. But it was this sword that silently pierced through the air and landed directly on Jilin's body. This was truly unavoidable. When the third young master stabbed out with his sword, he had already hit the mark. It was like the legendary spear of fate. Jilin stared at the third prince. This was the first time in this world that he paid so much attention to a human. The third prince's sword didn't cut through the dragon scales. Jilin's blood was seeping out from under his skin. The powerful dragon genes were repairing his body. Many small wounds were instantly healed, but the dragon blood that fell from Jilin's body burned fiercely on the ground like a torch. Countless golden figures filled the space around the third prince. Front, back, left, right, in the sky, and on the ground. There were many of them. Even Jilin's surroundings were filled with the third prince's golden figures. Jilin's eyes were filled with golden light. He thought to himself, "What is this? Domain? No, it doesn't seem like it." They were indeed just human figures. It was just that the power of many people was gathered in that sword. But the problem was, how many people, how many humans were needed to cause such damage to Jilin? Sure. Jilin looked at the third prince and said slowly, "Sure." The third prince still maintained his sword posture. "Brother Long, what do you think? Do you want to stop?" Jilin didn't say anything. He just shook his head. If he wasn't injured, there was still room for negotiation. But now that he was bleeding, there was no way to stop until one of them died. "How many people's power did you use for that sword?" Jilin asked. The third prince smiled. 80 million. Is this the one-on-one you were talking about? Jilin tilted his head. "It's you, Brother Long. You're challenging the entire human race." The third prince laughed, very happily. "You can't really expect me to fight you alone, right?" "Interesting." Jilin nodded. "As I said before, humans are very despicable." The third prince was a little proud. "Is that what you mean?" "Perhaps. Can we use the power of more people?" "Guess." "Shut up." "Domain." Jilin raised his dragon scale sword and stabbed it into the ground in front of him. Jilin's domain began to expand until it was 2 meters in front of him. With Jilin's body size, this domain was already the smallest. It could even be said to be close to him. Jilin's body was enveloped in a layer of red light. Facing an unprecedented opponent like the third prince, Jilin also showed an unprecedented cautious attitude. He was prepared for a protracted battle. The third prince's eyes focused. He could feel that the world around Jilin had changed. It was as if it was another world. The third prince slowly stabbed his sword again. Tens of millions of people moved with it. Bam! Jilin swayed slightly. That was all. Tisk! The third prince sighed softly. Although he knew that it wouldn't be so easy to defeat Jilin, he didn't expect that Brother Long would find a way to defeat him with just one sword. Was this the strength and realm of a dragon? Jilin raised his left hand at the third prince. A fireball appeared in front of his hand. At first, it was only the size of a palm. After a while, it was the size of a city gate. Whoosh! The fireball shot toward the third prince. It was a flash of lightning. The fireball was terrifying. However, the third prince couldn't dodge because there were countless human armies behind him. If he dodged, the people behind him wouldn't be able to stop it. The third prince held his sword with both hands. He raised it above his head and slashed with all his might. The fireball dissipated. Taking advantage of Jilin's distraction, the third prince took a step forward and came in front of Jilin. He stabbed his sword. Because each of the 80 million people helped the third prince take a step forward. Within 80 million steps, the third prince could go as far as he wanted. However, the sword couldn't pierce through. Once the emperor's sword entered Jilin's domain, it couldn't move an inch. It was very difficult to move even an inch. Even if 80 million people pushed together, it wouldn't help. Jilin took half a step back. He arched his back, puffed out his chest, and retracted his fist. Emperor's fist. Boom! Jilin's fist was bigger than the third prince's body. In front of such an attack, the third prince flew out like a kite with a broken string. The golden light around the third prince disappeared in large patches. The humans were in an uproar. If the third prince hadn't stood up immediately, they would have thought that the third prince was dead. In the crowd, the fist emperor, Musin, who only had one arm left, looked up at the clear sky as if nothing had happened. He thought to himself that the weather was really good. With His Majesty the Pope's style, it was impossible for him to not say anything. I didn't expect that Red Calamity, a dragon, would know a human fist technique. I just don't know how good he is at it. Please comment, Your Majesty the Fist Emperor. Musin's face darkened, but he still said, he is both form and spirit, and he's extremely talented. I'm not as good as him. When it came to fist techniques, the Fist Emperor never lied. Brother Long, aren't you going overboard by using a human fist technique to hit me, a human sovereign? The third prince patted the non-existent dust off his body and pretended to be relaxed. It's just one punch, and your light has dissipated a lot, Jilin said. It's fine. The third young master gripped the sword hilt again, and more figures appeared, instantly filling up the empty space. There were even more figures than before. We humans don't have any other good points, but we have a lot of people. If 80 million people can't break your domain, then I'll try 100 million. Sure, Jilin said in a deep voice. Then, his body began to shrink slowly, turning into a human. This way, he was about the same size as the third prince. The third prince took a step too close, and he walked into a place where the dragon scale sword couldn't reach. Otherwise, Jilin wouldn't have used his fist. However, that wasn't the end. Scarlet scales began to grow out from Jilin's human skin. The scales grew longer and gradually covered his entire body. Clang! With a sound, the scales locked together without a single gap. Only a pair of golden eyes were exposed. It was a full-body armor made of scales. Scarlet scales covered his entire body, golden eyes, a pair of wings on his back, and a huge red sword in his hand. At that moment, Jilin was even more ferocious and majestic than a demon king. Jilin, in his human dragon form. Come on, Jilin beckoned. The third prince was already prepared, but he didn't want to attack rashly. He had never seen Jilin in this form before, so he couldn't act rashly. Seeing that the third prince wasn't moving, Jilin assumed a stance himself. He stepped forward and flapped his wings. Boom! The huge sonic boom was like a heaven-shaking thunder. Even without the help of billions of living beings, Jilin wasn't any slower than the third prince. Using the momentum, Jilin pointed his sword out like the flow of time. Flowing light sword. The third prince didn't even look, but held his sword horizontally in front of him. If he defended, billions of people would defend with him. When billions of people defended together, the emperor's sword became a towering mountain ridge. The defense was like a mountain. I'll stand still and let the wind blow from all directions. Chapter 344. Jilin's sword was not only faster than time, it could even stun time. That sword seemed to contain a unique sense of beauty that made people unable to help but watch carefully. That was a realm that humans could only reach after countless trials and tribulations in the way of the sword. Not only that, but it also required some talent. The tip of the dragon scale sword did not touch the emperor's sword, but it was still blocked. The power of 100 million humans was enough to stop Jilin. As long as there were enough people, they could cross the gap no matter how deep or far it was. However, the price might be a change in the wind and clouds, and the earth would shake. The power of the human emperor and the power of the megalosaurus clashed. The weather became uncertain, and the earth began to shake and crack. The human army was a little confused. Even though they were usually good at fighting, they could not help but panic in the face of such a mythical battle. On the other hand, the emperors and legends standing in front of the army were very calm. They could even talk and laugh. Red Calamity's sword. Could it be the starting move of the legendary flowing light sword technique? Oh my, it's as fast as lightning. So powerful. The Fist Emperor's tone was very exaggerated. He was asking the obvious. Among the legends, he was the closest to the Sword Saint when his hands were still healthy. The two often exchanged pointers, so he was very familiar with the Sword Saint's sword techniques. Moreover, it was the Sword Saint's famous ultimate move. The Sword Saint used this move the most, because most people would not be able to make him use it twice. The Sword Saint lowered his head and did not speak, which was rare. Lord Sword Saint, don't lower your head. Say something. If this sword technique was used by a human, I might have to congratulate Lord Sword Saint for having a successor. At times like this, the Pope could not help but gloat. Red Calamity's talent in the way of the sword. The Sword Saint pondered for a moment. Although I don't want to say it, it is indeed better than mine. As soon as the Sword Saint said this, the atmosphere instantly became gloomy. The Sword Saint, Guy Mingwei, was a very proud person. Everyone present had heard him say, "In terms of talent in swordsmanship, no one can surpass me in this world." This was an extremely arrogant sentence. But now that the Sword Saint had said so, just how powerful was the Red Disaster's swordsmanship? Would the human sovereign be able to handle it? Just as everyone was worried about the human emperor, the Red Disaster was the first to end this pure brute force confrontation. The Red Calamity had changed its attack. Full moon sword, fluorescent light, oblique wind. It was drizzling. Broken mountain, sky piercer. Jilin's sword path became more and more varied. Sometimes it was dense and long, and sometimes it was as violent as a thunderbolt. It was like a storm hitting a reef on the sea. The golden shadows kept disappearing and reappearing. It was obvious that the third young master had expended a lot of energy. If it wasn't for the fact that he had the ability to travel 1,000 miles in a single step, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. In the crowd, the expressions of the various gods became very interesting. The Pope glanced at the Sword Saint. You said that his talent in swordsmanship is high, so it's inevitable that he secretly learned a few moves from the Red Disaster. But this isn't just 2 moves. This is already several sets of swordsmanship. Don't you think it's a bit too much to teach him? The Sword Saint coldly glanced at the Pope. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, and he simply spat out a word. Scram. In the end, the Pope wasn't an ordinary person. Facing the Sword Saint's sharp gaze, his face didn't show any fear. He still said, "You're too much. Even if you're helping an outsider, you can't do it like this. No matter what, the human sovereign is still your nephew. Look, they both use swords. Why is the Red Disaster's swordsmanship so sharp that it has reached perfection? Why hasn't the human sovereign come up with any decent swordsmanship?" The Pope was purely mocking. He already knew that the third prince couldn't learn swordsmanship when the third prince ascended to the throne. But this time, even the Sword Saint couldn't say anything. In front of so many people, for the first time in his life, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. The heavens were toying with him. Who would have thought that the Sword Saint's nephew couldn't learn a single set of swordsmanship? When teaching the third prince swordsmanship, the Sword Saint had more than once thought, "Is this guy really my nephew? Maybe Li Zheng found him somewhere to trick me." I didn't think that the Sword Saint's nephew would be suppressed in swordsmanship. TSK, TSK, TSK. War King's face was full of worry. The Sword Saint finally couldn't help but tighten his grip on the hilt of his sword. No one else said anything. "What's wrong? If you keep defending, you might die." Jilin brandished his great sword with incomparable ferocity. The third prince looked at Jilin's godlike figure and thought, as expected of the red disaster. 100 million, 50 million. The third prince swung his sword. The mountains and rivers trembled, and the red disaster was sent flying. Jilin flew into the sky and stabilized himself with his wings. He looked down. Because of the thick clouds, the third prince and the human army could no longer be seen. Jilin could only see them with his golden eyes. Jilin looked at his scales that weren't broken, but had some cracks. He felt a bit strange. He always heard humans say that one person could defeat 10 people, but he didn't think that there would be a day where the other person was one person and he was 10 people. Jilin slowly landed on the ground. How many people are there in the human race? Jilin asked. Childish. The third prince obviously wouldn't tell Jilin. It's not too late for you to admit defeat. Hee hee. Jilin was so angry that he laughed. Be careful. I won't be able to hold back anymore. Jilin's golden eyes suddenly became brighter. The signs of dragonization on his body became more and more serious. Fangs grew out of his mouth. His limbs became thicker, his nails became sharper, and a dragon tail grew out of his back. This was because Jilin used more of his dragon bloodline. Seeing Jilin's transformation, third young master secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If he saw this scene 3 years ago, he would probably be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 or 4 days. Brother Long, although I can't learn swordsmanship, it's not like I don't know anything about the products of the human race's wisdom. The third prince said loudly, "Summon the human race's sacred weapons." Just as the third prince finished speaking, countless balls of light lit up in the human army. Armor, spears, sacred techniques of light. There were also all kinds of gems and treasures. The 3-nation weapons floated above the third prince's head. Countless treasures scattered around the third prince like stars in the sky. They faintly formed a mysterious pattern. A formation? Jilin tilted his head. That's right. The third prince raised both his hands. The treasures glowed brightly. Every treasure was connected by light, gradually forming a complicated pattern. It was a gigantic formation pattern. It was scattered all over the place. All the celestial phenomena in the sky appeared. The 4 divisions, 8 trigrams, yin and yang were all contained within. Not bad. Jilin's golden eyes reflected the entire formation. He could see the profoundness of the formation. What's its name? Myriad Phenomena Formation. The third prince shouted, "Please advise me, Brother Long." Chapter 345. Following the third prince's shout, countless treasures floated up and rotated slowly like flowing stars, colorful and gorgeous. Jilin held his breath, his expression turning solemn. The third prince seemed to be standing on a commanding platform, surrounded by thousands of soldiers and horses, waiting for him to give the order to attack. The sky suddenly darkened. A moment ago, it was still daytime, but now it had turned into a resplendent night sky with twinkling stars. Under the emperor's command, the stars appeared. Day and night reversed. Jilin frowned. Humans are really arrogant. They are clearly so weak, but they can tamper with the laws of heaven and earth to such an extent. Treacherous. Brother Long, humans always say that humans can conquer the heavens. Do you think it's just a saying? The third prince said, "The reason why humans are stronger than other races is not because we are cruel and good at fighting, or because we have more people, but because we have the courage to fight against heaven and earth. When it rains and snows, we build houses to resist. When the roads are rugged, we build roads and bridges. When diseases are rampant, we find ways to treat them. Humans have always been fighting against heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all things as dogs, but we have to take ourselves seriously. What treacherous? Ridiculous. How can we trample on the laws of heaven and earth when we are in heaven and earth? Humans are bound to be punished by heaven." Jilin's tone was awe-inspiring. Third young master nodded. "I do believe that. Heaven and earth have never stopped testing the human race, but we still managed to survive. Until you appeared. Brother Long, you might be the heaven's wrath for the human race." "I'm not." Jilin clenched the sword in his hand. but I don't mind doing this for heaven. Then come and experience it for yourself, the backbone of the human race. Then give up this job. The third prince raised the emperor's sword in his hand. Starfall, Brother Long, this is my full blow. If you can take it, I admit defeat. Crack. The sound of glass shattering resounded through heaven and earth. A few cracks appeared in the pitch-black night sky. It was extremely dazzling. Then, the night sky dotted with countless stars fell with a whistling sound. Although it hadn't really hit the ground yet, a deep crater with a diameter of tens of meters had already appeared where Jilin was standing. The sky fell, followed by countless stars. It was enough to crush the world. Jilin's eyes shone with a golden light. He instantly reverted to his true form. In the face of such an attack, he could not hold back at all. He needed his huge body to face the huge sky. Jilin took a step back and hid his sword behind his back. An incomparably tyrannical fist intent and sharp sword intent rose from Jilin's body. Sword Saint and the Fist Emperor looked at each other and saw the strange splendor in each other's eyes. Heaven-cleaving sword? The Fist Emperor asked. Lord Sword Saint really doesn't hide anything. The true meaning of the Tyrant Emperor's fist. Looks like Red Calamity has already obtained the Fist Emperor's true inheritance, Sword Saint calmly said. You two are still bickering at a time like this. If Red Calamity was a human, you two would have to give up your titles of Fist Emperor and Sword Saint. The Pope could no longer hold back. But to be able to fuse Fist Intent and Sword Intent into one, I'm afraid even you two can't do it, right? Of course they couldn't do it. This was not something a human could do. The Tyrant Emperor's fist's power was infused into his legs and wings as he suddenly moved. Boom! With a huge tremor, Jilin turned into a red arrow and shot toward the night sky. It wasn't that he didn't want to dodge, but he really couldn't. When the night sky descended, Jilin was already enveloped by the starry sky. If he wanted to break out of this situation, he could only slash the sky with his power. Coincidentally, there was such a sword technique. In the winter of that year, Sword Saint stood alone by a stream and looked around. He felt that he was invincible and lonely, so he created this sword technique that opposed the heavens. The power of the dragon race and divine power were all contained in this man's sword technique. With such a sword technique, it was easy to cut through mountains and seas. Perhaps only the heavens could withstand it. With a flash of sword light, the starry sky collapsed. Jilin was also drowned in starlight. The third prince spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. All the treasures on his body were shattered. The night sky dissipated, and the world returned to Ming and Qing. The third prince tried his best to raise his head and open his eyes to look at the starry sky. The starlight slowly dissipated, and Jilin hovered in the sky, holding his sword with one hand. Ha ha! Earth-shattering cheers sounded like a tide. Those were the cheers of the beastmen and dwarves. Jilin won. Every human's face was covered with a layer of haze. Snatched the human emperor back. The Fist Emperor took a step forward. Activate! The Iron Blood King shouted. This time, there was no pause because there were only 2 words. So no one knew what he was going to activate. However, the people of the Snow Wind Empire should be able to understand. Wait a moment. Sword Saint's sword light flashed and stopped the Fist Emperor. What do you mean? The Fist Emperor was shocked. Wait a moment. Sword Saint only repeated. Jilin slowly exhaled, and his golden eyes became a little dim. Others couldn't see it, but his whole body was trembling slightly. The dragon blood that flowed out had already turned into flames in the air, and the scattered scales turned into elemental light under his control and dissipated into the air. The injuries he suffered this time might be even more serious than the injuries he suffered in the cosmic array. This was his weakest moment, but it didn't matter. He had already won this battle. Even if he was in a weakened state, he was confident that he could kill all the remaining humans. Jilin's golden eyes swept across the human army as if he was looking at a pile of dead people. Suddenly, a speck of golden light appeared in Jilin's peripheral vision. It was as small as a golden star in the sky, but it was daytime now. Jilin was taken aback and turned to look. Boom! Jilin's body trembled. and a thick golden light pierced through Jilin's body. A gaping wound appeared on Jilin's body, penetrating from front to back. He had been pierced through. Jilin slowly turned to look, and a bottomless hole appeared in the ground behind him. It was really bottomless and filled with endless darkness. But Jilin could see through the darkness to the bottom of the hole. A golden arrow was stuck in there. Jilin had seen this before. It was the Elven Queen's arrow. Roar! With a dragon's roar, dragon blood splattered everywhere, and Jilin fell to the ground. The blood on the ground had already turned into a sea of fire. Jilin fell into the fire, as if he was being cremated. The third prince saw what he wanted to see, and he closed his eyes in relief. The Elven Queen was really powerful. She could really hit him from such a long distance away. He had made the right bet. Brother Long must be cursing him for being despicable in his mind, but there was nothing he could do. Humans were so insignificant. If they wanted to fight against the heavens, they had to use some means, right? Even if they were unscrupulous, even if they were despicable and shameless. But in order to survive, so what? The instinct to survive was the same for all creatures and all races. Brother Long, don't you think so? Chapter 346. Elven Island. The Elven Queen stood on the shore, holding a huge bow in her hand. The bowstring was still vibrating. Drops of green blood dripped from the Elven Queen's white fingertips. Grass and trees grew wildly, and the entire Elven Island cheered. Behind her stood countless phantoms of gods. She had been preparing for this arrow for a long time. The third prince's biggest gain after coming to Elven Island was not learning how to use the human emperor's power, but the Elven Queen's promise of this arrow. The third prince's true trump card. Careful preparation. The enemy was in the open while she was in the dark, and Jilin was at his weakest right now. He had just defeated a powerful enemy and was careless. The arrow hit. The Elven Queen looked at the blood on her hand and remained silent. She had already broken the god's contract with this arrow. It would probably take some time for her to shoot another arrow out of Elven Island. Now, when the Sword Saint saw the red disaster fall to the ground, he immediately turned into a sword light and rushed forward. He wanted to pick up the third young master as soon as possible. There could not be any accidents. As for whether the red disaster was dead or not, there was no need to think about it. Even if it was not dead, there was nothing he could do. Moreover, he was not the only one who had started to move. Grab the Beast King. Sing roared loudly. He also took the lead and charged out. His silky mane stood on end. The human and red forces armies began to move. There were many people on both sides, like sand in a desert. When such a huge crowd moved, the scene was spectacular. It was like a tsunami or an avalanche. It was more like two black seas were surging against each other. But just as the two sides were about to break out, everyone on both sides stopped in tacit agreement. They stopped at a very dangerous distance. Both sides were very restrained because it was obviously not the time to start a real war. The third prince and Jilin were both injured. The most important thing now was to bring the two back to their respective camps for treatment. The third prince was easy to deal with. The Sword Saint rushed forward at full speed, and his speed was frightening. He picked him up and returned to the human camp in the blink of an eye. But Jilin was not easy to deal with. Not to mention his huge body. The key was that there was a raging fire burning around him, making it impossible to get close. Singh could only lead people to surround Jilin and be on guard against the humans. The human army began to slowly retreat, like the ocean's ebb and flow. Countless bishops of the Church of Light rushed around the third prince. The third prince's body. Staya even took out the Holy Grimoire of Light. Based on this healer lineup alone, as long as the patient was still breathing, they should be able to heal him. Boom, 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 boom. The ground suddenly a violent trembling. A huge shadow covered the sky above the humans. Countless people looked up, thinking that a huge cloud had appeared in the sky. It was Wazit Empire City. The huge city was erected and turned into a human shape. It was really indomitable and towered into the clouds. Its feet were on the ground, and its chest was already above the clouds. Compared to it, even Jilin was as small as a speck of dust. This was the human's masterpiece, a combination of a fortress and a moving city. It attracted everyone's attention. "Your Majesty!" Duke Lawrence ran out of nowhere and said while panting, "Iron Armor City has been activated." "I saw it." The Iron Blood King nodded. "Attack? If we let Iron Armor City attack now, we might be able to completely destroy the Red Disaster," Duke Lawrence said. The Iron Blood King did not say anything and was deep in thought. This was a crucial moment, and no one dared to act rashly. The Golden King was heavily injured, and the people were uneasy. "Your Majesty? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Duke Lawrence's eyes were red. He did not know why the Iron Blood King was hesitating. The Iron Blood King raised his hand. "Retreat first." "Your Majesty, look." The Iron Blood King pointed to the west. Duke Lawrence was stunned and looked in the direction the Iron Blood King was pointing. The huge city, standing in the depths of the volcano, seemed to be shaking slightly, and 5 huge red cannons slowly rose from the ground. They were comparable to the city walls. Duke Lawrence's eyes slowly widened. It was the god-killing cannon, the ultimate weapon of the dwarves. It was said that there was only one in the Dwarf Kingdom. During the Battle of Snowfire, this thing only used one cannon to destroy a moving city of the Snow Wind Empire. And now, there are 5 of them. Your Majesty, Iron Armor City is different from the 2 moving cities. It is more solid and powerful. Duke Lawrence was still unwilling to give up and wanted to try. Iron Armor City was indeed stronger than the 2 moving cities. Not only could it turn into a human shape, but it was also equipped with the Heart of Gold of the Middle Empire as an energy source and the runes of the Southern Exian Empire as reinforcement. Duke Lawrence felt that such a powerful weapon was worth a try, even if there were 5 god-killing cannons on the other side. No pain, no gain. This was an eternal truth. If they could kill the Red Disaster, it would be worth it even if they lost 70 to 80% of their troops. Don't panic. The Iron Blood King grabbed Duke Lawrence's collar and glared at him fiercely. "Retreat." Facing the Iron Blood King's fierce gaze, the Duke calmed down. He was indeed a little hot-blooded just now. He was not the supreme commander of this war. He was not, and neither was the Iron Blood King. This was a 4-nation alliance. While they were arguing, the other 3 nations had already begun to retreat. "Yes, Your Majesty." Duke Lawrence saluted and began to order the army to retreat. "How is the Beast King?" Sing anxiously shouted outside the flames. All of their lives were on Chi-Lin's shoulders. If Ji-Lin really died, it was uncertain whether the protection on them would lose its effect. If the protection failed, all the orcs and dwarves would instantly die in this volcano. Fortunately, His Majesty is still alive. Bat-Tel's voice came from the flames. Only he could step into Ji-Lin's flames. Phew, sighs of relief could be heard all around. Fortunately, there's the Beast King now. He fainted, but the wounds are healing quickly. The wounds burned by the flames are healing. Is it possible to bring the Beast King back? Impossible. He moved. His Majesty moved. Ji-Lin slowly opened his eyes, and the world was filled with loud cheers. Ji-Lin only felt a cold wind pass through his chest. He looked down and saw a transparent hole in his chest. Despicable humans. The elf, Queen. Ji-Lin forced the surrounding flames to his chest. Then his vision turned black and he fainted again. Sing was stunned. "Quick, bring the Beast King back. Then the army will regroup and kill all those despicable humans. They have tarnished the word duel." Chapter 347. Ji-Lin and the 3rd prince were dragged back to the base camp by both sides. Seeing that the dispute had just ended, both sides withdrew their troops. However, after half a day of silence, there was another roar of ferocious beasts. The roar resounded through the world. The fully armed beastmen warriors were like landslides and tsunamis as they rolled out from the volcano. Their eyes were red, as if they were wild beasts that had been hungry for a few days. A piece of meat suddenly appeared in front of them and was snatched away. Other than risking their lives, they did not think of anything else. The orc army and the elemental creatures were so huge that they seemed to cover the sky and earth. In such a vast war, No matter how tall and strong the human fortress was, it was not enough. They could only fight with their lives and fight with the same huge numbers. The endless rain of swords, energy bombs, and flint in the sky became an eternal scene in the sky. The battle line was extremely long, and every small battlefield was extremely fierce. Every moment, there were all kinds of hair-raising screams and roars. The orcs shouted, "Kill these despicable humans and restore the glory of the orc race." The humans shouted, "Protect the country and fight for every inch of land, for the glory of the empire." The humans and the red forces fought fiercely. Blood flowed like a river, just like hell on earth. It was a pity that those who sacrificed the most for the country and the race often got the least. 3 days later, in a small human city behind the front line, Huicheng was the westernmost city of the Saimai Empire. In the past countless years, this city had an important role of guarding against the elemental creatures in the volcano. However, since elemental creatures rarely came out of Mount Gerda, Huicheng was basically a decoration. The place was remote and there were few soldiers. The Empire's attention rarely fell on this place. But now, this was the headquarters of the four-nation coalition army. The emperors and legends of the human race were all here. Countless messengers lined up to walk in and out of here. The map drawn in the war hall was covered with 2 colored arrows. It was so densely packed that it made people dizzy at a glance. That represented the strength of both sides, like a dog's teeth intertwined with each other. The emperors and generals were all sitting in this room, looking at the map, but no one spoke. It seemed like no one wanted to issue an order, because they all knew that at this moment, any further preparations would be in vain. Perhaps the sagely king wanted to give an order to one of the cavalry units, but when a messenger went over to take a look, it was possible that the entire cavalry unit was gone. There were too many people, and a battle like this would have been messed up long ago. The best way to describe a war was to change in an instant. Unless something big happened, no one would act rashly. The War King's finger moved back and forth on the map. That's about it. The fully armed beastmen are much more powerful. That's right. With the strength of our empire, it'll be difficult for us to resist them. Muexian sighed. After all, it is the combined power of the orcs and the dwarves. The warlord sighed. There's no problem in a frontal battle, but if the red dragon theocracy suddenly attacks us from behind, I wonder if the Middle Empire has a way to deal with it. Warlord, please be at ease. Qinlan cupped her fists and said, "The red dragon theocracy will be guarded by His Majesty, the retired Emperor and Grand Marshal East Suppressing Marshal. I'm sure nothing will go wrong." But the red dragon theocracy's Fu Lei, Lord Shadow One, is also by His Majesty's side. That's good. After a long journey of nearly a month, Bane finally passed through the vast wasteland and arrived at Fire City. Previously, he had thought that as long as he found the person, he would be able to find a mount, which would speed up his journey by 4 or 5 days. However, he did not expect that even if he found the person, he would not be able to find a mount. This was because all the livestock had been requisitioned by the army. He could only walk over step by step. The further west he went, the drier the weather became. Bane, who had lived in Gerda Volcano, was very familiar with this. However, what he was not familiar with was the thick smell of blood in the air. Bane had also been on the battlefield. He had done many ruthless things in the Divine Dragon Empire. Logically speaking, he was also used to seeing blood. However, the smell of blood near Fire City was so thick that it made Bane feel nauseous. Every breath he took was like drinking a mouthful of blood. Bane braced himself and walked into Fire City step by step. There were many soldiers here, but they only glanced at Bane in a hurry and ignored him. No, it should be said that they did not have time to care about him. The soldiers here had long stopped seeing humans as a potential threat. After fighting with countless orcs and elemental creatures, they only had one thought in their minds. As long as it's a human, it's one of us. Just like that, Bane moved east and west in the command center of the Four-Nation Alliance army, as if there was no one there. On the contrary, he was very uneasy. When he was 10 kilometers away from here, Bane felt that something was wrong. When he was 10 kilometers away from here, Bane was sure that the two sides had already started fighting. When he was 2.5 kilometers away from here, Bane knew that the scale of this war was probably unprecedented and extremely tragic. And this war was caused by him. Although Fire City was not big, it was still a city. It was enough for an outsider to circle around and not find a way out. But fortunately, this was a city of the Saimai Empire. As long as it was a city of the Saimai Empire, there would definitely be a Church of Light in the center. If he wanted to find Staya here, the Church of Light was obviously the best choice. Bane lowered his head and walked towards the city center. Countless soldiers walked past him. His heart suddenly clenched in his chest. Phew. Bane sighed and continued to walk forward. It was not until Bane walked to the Church of Light that he met a guard for the first time. "Who is it? What do you want?" A soldier in the Middle Empire uniform asked. "I'm looking for the Saint of Light." Bane's tone was calm. "I wonder if the Saint of Light is here? If you're here, I'll have to trouble you to pass on the message." The soldier was stunned. The person in front of him was obviously not from the Middle Empire, but the way he spoke was very similar. "No, the Saint of Light is treating His Majesty right now. She can't leave for a moment. No matter who you are, I can't let you know. The Golden King is injured." Bane was shocked. "Who the hell are you?" The soldier raised his spear and pointed it at Bane. He looked a bit suspicious now. Who didn't know that Golden King was injured and unconscious within 100 miles? Bane didn't have time to explain. Suddenly, with a creak, the door of the church opened. A young woman in a white robe walked out. The soldier of the Middle Empire immediately put away his spear and nodded slightly to the woman. This was already very polite for these murderers who spent all their time on the battlefield. After all, the Church of Light was treating the Golden King. They couldn't neglect it. The saint said to let this person in, the woman in the white robe said softly. Chapter 348. Tap, tap, tap in the brightly lit stone corridor. Bane followed closely behind the woman in the white robe. After passing through the long corridor, Bane came to a door. The woman in the white robe knocked on the door. "Saint, I have brought him here. Let him in." Staya's voice came from behind the door. "Yes." The woman in the white robe answered softly and pushed the door open. As the door opened, a white light overflowed from the room, as if there was a huge light source in the room. Bane narrowed his eyes and touched the long sword on his back. "Please come in." After his eyes adjusted to the light, Bane slowly walked into the room. The room was very simple, and the smell of candles filled the entire room. There was a bed in the middle of the room, surrounded by bishops from the Church of Light. Every one of them had a bright holy light in their hands. They were healing someone. Bane could tell at a glance. But who was it? How badly was the person injured to make the Church of Light so concerned? Logically speaking, with so many bishops from the Church of Light here, even if the person was half dead, it would only be a small injury. These bishops could have a cup of tea together first, and then they would heal the person after the person breathed out the last breath. Plus, Staya was here, and the Holy Book of Light was here. "What are you doing here?" Staya walked out from the crowd and looked directly at Bane. "We have been looking for you for a long time. I have something to give you." Bane took out the long sword on his back. "Who is this person?" Staya was silent for a moment. Liu. Bane was stunned. "The third prince. Come out and tell me." Staya grabbed Bane's collar and dragged him forward. Bane was half lying on the ground and was being dragged by Staya like a dead dog. Staya was shockingly strong and could fight against level 8 magic beasts. Dragging Bane was not a problem for her. Staya dragged Bane all the way up to the rooftop. Staya threw Bane away and pointed to the west. "Look." Ben turned his head to take a look, then immediately retracted his gaze. He already expected this tragic scene and didn't want to see it. Jilin said you stole someone from him. For that person, Jilin started this war, Staya said in a low voice. "Are you trying to say that it's all my fault?" Ben looked at Tia. "No, saving people is never wrong." Steve shook his head and said firmly, "But I want to know, who is that person? Who is important to Jilin? Does it matter who that person is?" Bane said, "Are you planning to find that person, give her to Jilin, and end this war?" "Staya, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I'm not you." I may never be able to figure out how to save thousands by killing one person. If that's the case, I can only follow my heart. If I want to save her, then I will save her." Staya was silent. After a long silence, Staya looked at the battlefield in the distance and said slowly, "Yes, it doesn't matter anymore." "What would you do if it was you?" Bane asked. "As the princess of the Empire, I would hand that person over without hesitation," Staya said. "Is that so?" Bane lowered his head and looked very lonely. "The third prince was beaten by Jilin?" "Yes." "The third prince lost the duel between the third prince and Jilin?" "He didn't lose, nor did he win." "What do you mean?" "The third prince is half dead now, and Jilin is severely injured too." "Jilin is severely injured?" Bane suddenly looked up. "How is that possible?" "Jilin has the dragon scale sword, and the third prince is no match for him. The human emperor is very strong too, but it's true that they weren't able to defeat Red Unicorn. It was the Elven Queen's arrow that severely injured Red Unicorn." The Elf Queen. Bane heard the name and was dazed for a moment. That creature with a perfect appearance, but was even stronger than Jilin, left a deep impression on him. Jilin was ambushed. Bane calculated in his mind, and it was easy to figure out the cause and effect. When Jilin was fighting with the Elf Queen, he was still holding onto Yi Si, and the distance between them was like face to face. In such a situation, Jilin was still able to dodge the Elf Queen's lightning-fast arrow. Now, the Elf Queen was thousands of miles away from Jilin, but she was able to hit him with one arrow. It could only mean that Jilin was ambushed. "Jilin, will he die?" Bane said. "I don't think so," Staya said. "Can the third prince be healed?" Bane asked again. "It's difficult, but he can." "The injuries caused by Jilin are always difficult to heal," Staya said. "I didn't notice it before." "Because he rarely has injured people under his command." Bane smiled bitterly. "Almost all the humans who fought with him are dead. The third prince is already very strong if he doesn't die." "Did Aisha help you?" Staya suddenly said. Although there was no beginning or end, and it was somewhat abrupt, Bane clearly understood. "You guessed it?" Bane said. "It's obvious," Staya said. "Do you think you can save someone from Jilin by yourself?" "That's true," Bane admitted honestly. "The third prince was able to go to the Elf Island because of Aisha's help," Staya said again. Suddenly, countless thoughts flashed through Bane's mind. He suddenly realized that Aisha was the one behind everything, the one who could see the big picture and even control the big picture. She even schemed against Jilin. She knew how to go to the Elf Island. When she was treating Staya's injuries, she was the one who suggested going to the Elf Island to treat Staya's injuries. After that, Aisha disappeared. Even Jilin couldn't find her. Bane shivered. He knew that Aisha was planning an earth-shattering scheme. Even the current war, with so many people filling the land, was just a transition in her plan. As for himself, he was probably just an insignificant chess piece. He couldn't see Aisha's plan clearly, just like how an ant couldn't see the huge castle in front of him. However, he only saw a small part of Aisha's darkness, and it was enough to make his hair stand on end. No wonder she was the legendary evil witch. She really lived up to her name. She didn't even do it herself, but the number of people she killed was already many times more than Jilin. "What do you want to give me?" Staya interrupted Bane's thoughts. Bane raised his head and saw Staya's sunny face. The haze in his heart was slightly dispelled. Bane was hesitant, but he gritted his teeth and finally gave the holy sword to Staya. No matter what Aisha wanted to do, Bane believed that Staya would always be the one who countered her. There was no harm in Staya being stronger. "What is this?" "This is Boom." Bane was about to speak, but the earth suddenly shook and interrupted him. The earth began to shake violently, and a huge sound came from the west. Bane and Staya turned around. The biggest volcano of Mount Gerda was standing far away. The volcano shook, and what came out of the crater wasn't hot red lava, but a dazzling white light. A huge white light pillar shot into the sky from the crater. It lit up the entire world. Staya and Bane were very familiar with the position of the light pillar. Jilin's Red Dragon Palace was right under the volcano. "This is..." Bane looked at the white light pillar and felt it was very familiar. "The mercy of the God of Light." Staya stared at the light pillar and said slowly. Chapter 349. The God of Light's Mercy. Hearing Staya's words, Bane was completely stunned. He looked up at the sky. Where was the God of Light? When he lowered his head to look at the bloody battlefield that looked like hell on earth, how could he be merciful? What do you mean? If he didn't understand, he would ask. Bane was also a positive and enterprising young man. The God of Light's Mercy is the pinnacle of healing spells in the Church of Light. The ultimate healing spell, Staya said slowly. It's a type of magic known as the divine art. Only the Saintess of Light could cast it. Why can only the Saintess use it? Because it's recorded in the Holy Book of Light. Only the Saintess of Light can learn it, and it can't be taught. Then, that pillar of light is... Ben's tone was a little uncertain. That's right. Staya was very sure. It must be the God of Light's Mercy. Bane blinked. That direction is Jilin? He used the spell? Staya nodded slowly. Isn't only the Saintess able to cast it? How'd he learn it? Bane gulped. Did you teach him? Of course not. Staya shook her head, but her gaze was fixed on the white pillar of light. Jilin read the Holy Book of Light. He should know all the secret spells in it. Red Dragon Palace. Jilin's huge body lay on the stone platform. In order to put him back here, the Red Dragon Palace used a lot of effort. They even used the tools of the dwarf race. After putting him here, Singh turned around and led his people to fight the humans. Only Bat-Tel and a large number of elemental creatures were left, and they were heavily guarded. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Jilin slowly opened his eyes. An unprecedented sense of weakness rushed into his mind like a tide. Master, Bat-Tel's excited and surprised voice sounded. Jilin glanced at his chest and saw that the wound was still burning fiercely. The fire was the best medicine in the world for Jilin. The wound slowly healed. Bat-Tel, Jilin said. Master, I'm here. Tell all the elemental creatures in the Red Dragon Palace to hide. Yes. Jilin was always very satisfied with Bat-Tel. He had never listened to the nonsense of humans and had always obeyed Jilin's words unconditionally. Detestable the third prince, detestable elven queen, you have. Jilin clutched his chest as he slowly stood up. He crossed his hands and placed them on his chest, forming a simple hand seal. If Staya was here, she would definitely be shocked and might even want to fight Jilin to the death. This was because what Jilin was doing was a gesture from the Church of Light. It was the handprint used by the Church of Light to greet others and pray to the God of Light. It symbolized the light in the hearts of believers of light. It was peaceful, modest, and knowledgeable. Now that Jilin was doing it, it was filled with a strange sense of beauty, ferocious and peaceful, evil and light, tyrannical and gentle. Many completely opposite feelings clashed and blended in Jilin's body. But perhaps in Staya's eyes, this was just blasphemy to the Church of Light. Jilin was also not used to this handprint. He tilted his head and thought about the content on a page of the Holy Book of Light. Humans always say that it's never a burden to have more skills. It does make sense. As Jilin finished speaking, a spot of holy light appeared in the gap between his crossed hands. Then, the purest and most authentic holy light filled the entire Red Dragon Palace and shot up into the sky, illuminating the world. If Jilin did not ask the elemental creatures to retreat in advance, this would have been enough to disperse most of the elemental creatures. Under such a large amount of holy light, the healing speed of Jilin's chest was more than doubled. Elven Island. The Elven Queen was beside the spring of life. She suddenly raised her head and looked towards the west. Her flawless face darkened a little. After a long while, the Elven Queen frowned and said in a low voice, "The shame of the dragon race." Woo, woo, woo. The long sound of the horn was heard. The sound was long and spread far and wide. What do you mean? Bane asked, gathering the important humans to discuss important matters. Staya sighed. Jilin's actions are so big. Of course, he'll be noticed. Staya punched the city wall with all his might, causing cracks to appear all over it. Bane felt a little guilty and took a step back. Well, I can't blame you. After all, he insisted on seeing it. You couldn't do anything about it. Besides, even if Jilin doesn't know how to heal, he might not die, right? I know. Staya sighed again. But a Jilin who knows how to heal and a Jilin who doesn't are worlds apart. Yes. Bane nodded. Of course, he understood. No matter what race, a class that could heal themselves was always the most insane. If the Jilin before was a warrior who could fight and defend, then the Jilin now was a warrior with a bishop who specialized in healing. And a bishop who could use the ultimate healing magic. The humans want to kill Jilin. I'm afraid it's already impossible. Staya sounded pained. Do you really want to kill Jilin? Bane looked at Staya and asked seriously. Staya paused. I don't need to tell you how much Jilin is a threat to the human race. As the princess of the Empire, if there's a chance, it's my responsibility. You want to do it yourself? Bane froze. For the first time, Bane realized that determined could sometimes equate to cruel. No matter what, Jilin and Staya had been together for a long time. Plus, Jilin treated Staya quite well. I'm the Saint of Light. Staya's voice became softer. Then what do you really think? Bane asked. That's not important. If what you really think in your heart is not important, how can you say you've truly lived? I'm willing to give myself completely to the light and the people of the Saimai Empire. What if one day, the light wants you to betray your country and the people? Staya glared at Bane and didn't say anything. Because this question was basically like if your mother and I fell into the water, who would you save? Stupid and meaningless. It wasn't worth answering. Bane didn't care that he didn't get an answer. He was just arguing anyway. Since the Saint of Light is so determined and you care about the world, please take a look at the thing in your hand. Bane looked at Staya. Staya pulled down the linen cloth in her hand. A blue-gold sword appeared in her hand. A sword. Staya froze. She had never held such a light sword before. It was as if it was nothing, but it felt so real in her hand. It felt so powerful and reliable. This is... If you want to kill the Megalosaurus with your own hands, you need a holy sword. Bane was expressionless. Holy sword? Why is it with you? Its previous owner used it to challenge Jilin. Then he was beaten to death by Jilin. He asked me to bring the holy sword to you. Bane shrugged. He wanted to tell Staya not to be impulsive after getting the holy sword and think that she could defeat Jilin. Staya looked at the holy sword and felt that there was hope for humans. Chapter 350. Human Army Command Center. The leaders of the human race gathered in this room that was less than 100 square meters, all frowning. The atmosphere was so tense that no one could stay. Therefore, there was no one else in this room. If time went back 10 years and anyone in this room showed the same expression, at least 1,000 people would suffer. But now, there was nothing they could do. Bang! War King slammed the table. Everyone looked up and glanced at him. No one in this room was afraid of him. Your Highness, what's going on? War King looked at the Pope like a hawk. Why can the Red Disaster use the Church of Light's divine arts? Can the God of Light protect the Red Disaster? Oomph. The Pope snorted coldly and did not say anything. The warlord was simply being unreasonable. What kind of divine art is this? The Shengming king asked. The Pope pondered for a moment. It should be the God of Light's mercy. Should be. War King panicked. You're the Pope, and you don't even know the Church of Light's secret arts? There are many secret arts in the Church of Light. How can I know all of them? The Pope said confidently. You. War King was furious. Shut up, that's enough. Iron Blood King's tone was stiff. Iron Blood King is right. Sacred King said. The most important thing now is to find out what the Red Disaster is doing. Pope, tell us about the God of Light's mercy. What kind of effect does this legendary divine art have? The God of Light's mercy is the Church of Light's legendary healing technique. It's a true miracle. As for its effect, it's said to be able to heal all kinds of pain and illness in the world. Why is it only a rumor? Sword Saint said coldly. Because the God of Light's mercy is a divine art recorded in the Holy Bible of Light. Only the saintess can see it. Is that divine art really that powerful? Aren't you exaggerating? Musin said. The Pope shook his head. There are historical records of this in the Saimai Empire. About 400 years ago, a new type of disease appeared in the Simi Empire. It was highly contagious and extremely difficult to cure. The epidemic spread like wildfire. At that time, the Simi Empire was unable to control it. In the end, the Saint of Light of that generation and all the bishops of the Church of Light worked together to display the mercy of the God of Light. In an instant, all the patients recovered to their original state. The diseases that afflict the earth vanish like snow in the sun under the illumination of the holy light. Following the Pope's statement, everyone present fell silent. They were all monarchs of a country, or they were responsible for the people of the world. They had all been troubled by plagues and other diseases. Therefore, they could understand how shocking the Pope's words were. The mercy of the God of Light was truly a godlike divine spell. But even so, the divine arts that could have saved all living beings had now been grasped by the calamity of mankind. To put it simply, the red disaster is healing itself, Musin said. How long will it take for him to fully recover? War King asked. I don't know. The Elven Queen's arrow and the red disaster are things that humans have never faced before. There's no way to deduce, the Pope said. The worst-case scenario is that the red disaster will fly out of Red Dragon City and spit fire above our heads, Sword Saint said. We need to take a gamble. Iron Blood King's eyes slowly swept across everyone. Are you saying that we should show all our cards now? Qinlan asked. The red disaster, serious injuries. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's fleeting, Iron Blood King said. We'll stake it all on this. After a short silence, War King sighed deeply and said, Iron Blood King's words make sense. Everyone gently nodded their heads. But our people can't charge into Mount Gerda, Sacred King said. How can we kill the red disaster? We can, War King said. By we, he was obviously referring to all the high-level combatants of the human race. Although the legendaries are strong, there are too many beastmen. You'll be drowned by the beastmen army. You won't even be able to make a splash, Duke Lawrence said. We're not going to fight the beastmen army. We're just going to pass through, Sword Saint said. With these comrades beside him, he was confident that they could pass through the beastmen army and reach Red Dragon City. Red Dragon City is a city built by the dwarves. It's filled with traps and dangers, Duke Lawrence said. What's there to be afraid of? Sword Saint said angrily. There's no need for you to risk yourselves. Iron Blood King stood up. We've been preparing for this for many years, and now's the time. What do you mean? War King was stunned. He didn't understand. His Majesty means that the frontline battle will be left to us. Duke Lawrence smiled slightly. He looked like a strategist. Church of Light, Saint of Light. Princess. Staya. Bane called Staya loudly, but Staya seemed to be mesmerized by the holy sword and didn't hear him at all. Until the ground started to shake. The ground started to shake. Even Bane couldn't stand still for a while. He swayed left and right, and finally managed to stand still by holding onto the wall. What's wrong? What happened? Bane yelled. Suddenly, a huge shadow covered Bane's head, and then quickly passed by. Bane raised his head abruptly, only to see an indomitable giant striding over his head. The shadow was just one of the giant's feet. The giant was so tall that it only took one step to cross over the Fire City. What's this? Bane yelled. The Snow Wind Empire's mobile city. You've seen it before, Styus said. I've seen the mobile city before, but how did it stand up? Bane pointed to the mobile city that was already far away. He felt like his worldview had been greatly impacted, because human beings can improve. Styus suddenly said a very philosophical sentence, which made Bane stunned. But it was at this moment that Bane suddenly understood something. They want to take advantage of the situation? Bane widened his eyes and looked at Staya. Staya frowned and looked at Bane strangely. Her eyes seemed to say, why did you suddenly become so childish? If human beings want to kill Jilin, taking advantage of the situation is the only way. Staya said, if we can't kill Jilin before he fully recovers from his injury, I'm afraid that from now on, human beings will no longer have the ability to resist him. Bane choked. He felt as if there was a mass of air in his chest that he couldn't spit out or swallow. Do you really want to kill Jilin? For all the people in the world. Staya was always so righteous. All the people in the world. Bane looked up. I don't know them. But Jilin, he's our friend. Staya clenched the holy sword in her hand. You have betrayed him. Bane shook his head. I just don't want him to hurt Lysana. I don't want him to hurt anyone. But I don't want anyone to hurt him or even kill him. Stupid. As long as Jilin exists, he will hurt human beings. You, and I know it very well. I don't care. Chapter 351. The holy light that erupted from the crater was like a bomb hanging in everyone's hearts, because they did not know when a red megalosaurus would fly out of the holy light. It would fly recklessly in the sky, slaughtering everyone. No one could bear the feeling of death approaching step by step, or rather, the feeling of scaring themselves. Under such pressure, the humans could no longer bear it and used all their trump cards. The mobile city that had been built for several years had completely given up its dignity as a city. It stood up from the ground, towering over the earth. It was no longer related to the functions and forms that a city should have. This was the ultimate weapon that the humans imagined to be used to destroy the Red Disaster in the era when a human emperor did not appear. It was indeed unstoppable. The distance of his steps was the size of a city, and the ground collapsed with each step. The humans have really made something amazing over the years. The Dwarf King put down the clairvoyance in his hand and sighed. The mobile city was too huge. Even standing on the Red Dragon City, they could see it clearly from such a distance with the naked eye. We can't let it rush into our camp. Sing's voice was a little anxious. That thing looked terrifying. Once it entered the Beastman army, every move it made would cause unbearable damage to the Beastmen. It would be normal for it to trample hundreds of orcs to death with a single step. Don't worry. The Dwarf King patted Sing's thigh. In terms of mechanical construction, the humans will never be better than us dwarves. Look at that thing, and you can still boast so shamelessly. It just looks powerful. The Dwarf King's tone was very exaggerated, trying hard to express his contempt for the humans. Machines are not humans. It's so tall and so big, and we have to make it stand up. What a joke. Useless design. If you have any tricks, hurry up and use them. Don't worry. The Dwarf King's gaze was deep, and his eyes were full of disdain as he looked at the mobile city. Humans were so stupid. They always liked to do meaningless things and waste their energy, such as carving patterns on sword hilts and decorating armor with beast heads. They occupied a lot of resources for no reason, but they could not make good use of them, because they were stupid. Look, this is the work of us dwarves. This is the true aesthetics of machines. The Dwarf King opened his arms and shouted loudly. This was not said to Sing, but to the whole world. It was also a challenge to the humans. Although the world could not hear it, neither could the humans. A few small hills suddenly rose from the surroundings of the Red Dragon City. They were made of steel with a cold luster. They were cannons, the most basic and simple cannons. Sing took a deep breath. He felt that these things were really in the style of the dwarves. They were simple and unadorned, but very reliable. There were no surprises, only power. However, the ground nearby ground by the dwarves have been dubbed by the dwarves. Will it work? Sing was still a little worried. After all, the humans' weapons looked too ruthless. Don't worry, during the Battle of Snow and Fire, we only need to use one cannon to destroy one. The Dwarf King waved his hand, indicating that he didn't care about that thing at all. Then how did you lose? But your country moved after the war. The Dwarf King rolled his eyes at Sing. Because we could only fire one shot. The God-slaying cannon uses magma as its energy source. The volcano before was too small. After all, it was a volcano in a snowy land. There was not much heat. What about now? Gerda Volcano. From here to the west, there is no end. Seeing the moving city getting closer and closer, Sing was really panicking. Then what are you waiting for? Waiting for it to get closer. Mobilize the troops and let our people stay away from this thing, the Dwarf King shouted. Do I need you to tell me that? When this thing stood up, the troops were already shrinking. But there was not enough time. God-slaying cannon. Fire. As the Dwarf King waved his hand, the muzzle of a God-slaying cannon began to light up. Sing could clearly feel the surrounding air become hot. This was the depths of the volcano. The temperature was already extremely high. Moreover, he had the buff given by Jilin. Under such circumstances, he could still feel the temperature rising. One could imagine how high the temperature around him was now. Buzz, the god-slaying cannon fired. The huge muzzle shot out a red arc of light, like a red comet streaking across the earth. The tail behind it did not dissipate for a long time. The sky was scorched. This was a god-slaying cannon. The god-slaying cannon was extremely fast. It was even as fast as light. When the red light appeared on this side, it had already hit the target. Boom! It hit the target in one shot. The moving city froze for a moment, and its entire body retreated a few meters. There was no suspense. There was no possibility of missing. The dwarf race was aiming at a target that was taller than a mountain. If it missed, the dwarf would probably commit suicide on the aiming seat. The dwarf king raised his eyebrows at Sing proudly. He felt that the outcome was already decided. Dwarf king. Sing's hair stood on end. He turned to look at the dwarf king. His eyes were as wide as copper bells. How? The dwarf king was stunned. He looked at the moving city before he finished speaking. In an instant, the dwarf king stopped breathing. It was as if he had lost the strength to breathe. His lips were slightly open. He did not blink. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. Impossible! The dwarf king suddenly roared. Because other than the moving city being pushed back a little, it was not damaged at all. Impossible! Other than the dragon scale sword, there is no other material in the world that can resist the god-slaying cannon. No, Sing suddenly said. He pointed at the moving city and said, "Look carefully. There is something." Hearing this, the dwarf king quickly took out his clairvoyance and looked at the moving city. There were specks of green light floating in front of the moving city. They were like fireflies dancing in front of people. Countless green light specks formed a huge green array in front of the moving city. It formed a barrier in front of the moving city. The thing that blocked the god-slaying cannon was that barrier. That was the perfect combination of the Middle Empire's array and the technology of the Snow Wind Empire. "What is it?" Sing asked. "It is a person?" The dwarf king was a little uncertain. He focused his gaze. Slowly, the dwarf king saw the thing in the green light specks. "It is a humanoid machine. It is bright snow divine weapon. Thousands of bright snow divine weapon." What? Sing had never heard of it before. God-slaying cannon, fire continuously. The dwarf king shouted. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 5 god-slaying cannons fired continuously. Every shot was earth-shattering. Every shot had the power to pierce through mountains. Every shot hit the target accurately. The moving city squatted down and allowed the barrier formed by the bright snow divine weapon to completely protect itself. Red arcs of light streaked across the sky in a deadly trajectory. It was like a heavenly punishment. The moving city did not move. It raised a green shield to block every red light. It was as steady and thick as the earth. "You said the humans are stupid earlier?" Sing gritted his teeth and said, "Humans are indeed stupid. However, they have a strong learning ability. Dwarf King, since you have used this move before, then in the next war, humans will definitely have countermeasures. Dwarf King, you are looking down on humans." Chapter 352. Thousands of bright snow, godly soldiers. Warlord looked at the light spots around the moving city and nodded. He gave Iron Blood King a thumbs up. "Iron Blood King, you're indeed someone who does great things silently." Iron Blood King glanced at Warlord and said nothing. The atmosphere was a little awkward. What His Majesty means is that the human race was able to create so many bright, snow, godly soldiers because of the support of various countries. The Snow Wind Empire only did what we were supposed to do. We don't dare to claim the credit, so it's not worth mentioning, Duke Lawrence quickly said with cupped fists. Warlord blinked and was a little confused. He turned to look at Musin. "Is that what he means?" "You can say that." Musin waved his hand and gave a perfunctory answer. He was discussing with Sword Saint about the specific route to attack the Red Disaster. He really did not have time to talk to his emperor. "You haven't decided yet?" Warlord frowned. "Didn't you two go to Mount Gerda?" "But that was when we were young." Sword Saint sighed. They were the ones who chose the route because they had gone to the depths of the volcano to train when they were young. They were more familiar with the route. Moreover, the terrain has obviously changed. Musin also had a headache. He looked at the mountain-like Red Dragon City in the distance and the god-slaying cannons around it. He was at a loss. The dwarves had obviously dug out the area around Red Dragon City. The terrain of the roads was naturally different. It's all nonsense. Warlord slammed the table. Red Dragon City is so big. How can we get lost looking at it? Sword Saint and King of Fighters looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Warlord had been invincible for too long. He had been called the strongest human for many years. He had long developed the habit of looking down on everything. Even the appearance of the Red Disaster couldn't change this habit of his. Red Dragon City was built by the dwarves. It's bound to be filled with traps. We can't force our way in, Duke Lawrence said. Iron Blood King nodded silently. That means we need a spy who is very familiar with the routes inside Red Dragon City. King of Sacred thought for a while. The orcs won't help us, Sing said. The dwarves won't either, Duke Lawrence said. Elemental creatures do not have the ability to communicate with humans, the Pope replied. Dead. Sword Saint frowned. No. Duke Lawrence shook his head. The Middle Empire said that there is always a way out. There is someone familiar with Red Dragon City who can cooperate with us. After a moment of silence, the air suddenly became quiet. No one asked who it was, because it was obvious that only the Saintess of the Light, Staya. No! Everyone turned their heads and looked at the person who spoke with a strange expression. This was not a surprising answer, but what was surprising was that the person who said this was not the Wise King or the Pope, but the Sword Saint Guy Mingwe, a person who had nothing to do with the Saint of Light. The Saint of Light is currently treating His Majesty, the Golden King. The Golden King is severely injured. The Sacred Tome of Light is indispensable. The Sword Saint said. Then why don't we ask the Saintess to draw a map? Musin asked. A map is too risky. The Iron Blood King was halfway through his sentence, but when he saw everyone's expression, he sighed. Now, it seems that is the only way. Then, who will tell the Saintess? The Pope spread his hands, indicating that whoever wanted to go could go. The Saintess of the Light belongs to the Church of Light. After all, His Majesty the Pope should not decline this responsibility. Duke Lawrence quickly said, I'll go. Sword Saint finished speaking and turned to leave. Look at him. The Pope looked at Sword Saint's back and expressed his disdain to the others. At the Church of Light, Bane held onto the wall of the rooftop and looked at the moving city in the distance without blinking. An indescribable light flashed in his eyes. The light from the god-slaying cannon pierced through the sky and fell to the ground like a storm. The moving city was like a pillar that would not fall for 10,000 years, standing in the storm like a mountain. Amazing. Bane was so shocked that he could not speak. Yes, the 5 empires have never worked together before. Of course, the products produced are also unprecedented. Staya's eyes were cold. She did not seem to be as impressed as Bane by the human's great masterpiece. Yes. I have to say, Jilin's appearance has helped the human race improve greatly. Without Jilin, the 5 empires would not have been able to unite. No. Now, there are only the 4 empires left. Bane did not notice at all and continued to talk to the moving city. Back in the Snow Wind Empire, one shot could have destroyed it, but now it is unharmed after taking so many shots. How fast it is improving. Staya sneered. The god-slaying cannon is the most powerful weapon of the dwarves. There is nothing in the world that could take a shot from it and be unharmed. Even Chi Lin couldn't do it. It looks fine on the surface, but that doesn't mean it is. Bane was stunned. What's wrong with it? Every time it takes a shot, the bright snow, godly weapon will consume a huge amount of resources, and those resources should be used in other places. Staya said in a deep voice. Bane slowly retracted his finger. This time he understood. Staya's cynicism came up again. Then what do you think those resources should be used? Disaster relief, road building, bridge building, flood control, printing the Holy Book of Light. Staya said it so decisively, as if she did not even think about it, or as if she had already thought about it thousands of times in her head. If these are the common resources of the 5 empires, the first 4 are fine, but the last one is a bit inappropriate, right? What's inappropriate about it? Staya opened her eyes wide, which was rare for her. From her perspective, everyone in the world should believe in the God of Light. The reason why there were still people who did not believe in it was because the Holy Book of Light was too small. There are already enough Holy Books of Light. Bane face-palmed. I'm an orphan. I have no parents. I have nothing but walls, but I have a few Holy Books of Light. Why? Don't you give everyone one? Staya was also stunned. The villagers gave them to me. That's not important. Bane was going crazy. What I want to say is that developing weapons is also important. Humans need to have the power to protect themselves. No, Staya said slowly. People just need a sense of security. Many enemies and threats often only existed in people's imaginations. In order to deal with the enemies they created, they would endlessly develop weapons or cultivate in order to gain power. But power is endless and destructive. It will get stronger and stronger until it is out of humans' control and beyond what humans can handle. Just like the moving city. Bane, let me ask you, if the moving city is controlled by evil people, how do we defend against them? What do you mean? Bane was stunned. What I mean is if humans continue to develop like this, humans will eventually be destroyed by their own power. Staya's eyes were burning. In Bane's eyes, she was like a lunatic. But things are already like this. What do you want to do? Bane knew that he could not beat Staya, so he could only go along with what she said. Now that the whole world is under the threat of Jilin, humans need to protect themselves. This is the only way. Staya thought for a moment, then looked up at Bane. Her eyes flashed with a light that made Bane's heart palpitate. So, I have an idea. Please tell me. Let's kill Jilin. Chapter 353. Let's kill Jilin. Hearing Staya's words, Bane almost choked himself to death by inhaling a breath of cold air. What did you say? Bane couldn't believe his ears. I said, that's enough. Bane quickly waved his hand to stop Staya. He didn't want to hear that sentence a second time. Are you crazy? Although you do look a little crazy now, you don't have to do this, right? And I killed Jilin. If he's so easy to kill, do you think you and I would have a chance? Are you sure you don't want to kill yourself with me? What did I offend you? Bane spoke very quickly. His questions were like a string of cannons, and he didn't stop. Staya had too many things to say, so Bane didn't know where to start. It was like you were comforting a soldier who was punished by the Grand Marshal. You tried to comfort him, but in the end, he really couldn't take it lying down. He gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, saying to you through gritted teeth, let's kill the Grand Marshal. Don't even let a single one of his tens of thousands of soldiers go. What else could you do other than chuckle? Moreover, Staya's suggestion was much more ridiculous than that. Bane looked at Staya. For the first time, he had a new understanding of Staya. Was she a hot-blooded girl who was extremely angry? Was the reason of for the sake of the people really that good? Bane never thought so. Back when he was in the Red Dragon sect, although there was a righteous gimmick like for the sake of the people of the Divine Dragon Empire, he would still be furious when he saw the Divine Dragon Empire's army oppressing the good people. However, Bane never thought of truly devoting himself to this great cause. Even at the most emotional moment, Bane would always remember that he was here to find clues about the Elf Island. What are you panicking for? Staya yelled. She was a young girl, and she was very majestic. You're going to take me to kill Jilin. How can I not panic? Bane retorted. Do you think you can defeat Jilin just because you have a holy sword? Why don't you return the sacred sword to me first? Quiet. Staya pressed on Bane's shoulder, and a warm, holy light flowed from Staya's hand into Bane's blood. Bane felt as if he was bathing in the bright sunshine. Gradually, Bane calmed down. Phew! Bane let out a long breath and closed his eyes to calm himself down. After a few seconds, Bane opened his eyes. His gaze became firm and deep. What do you mean? Staya nodded in satisfaction. She thought that Jilin was indeed blessed by the heavens. He picked up a random person from a small mountain village, and his mind was so firm. It was really good. My idea is that we go find Jilin and persuade him to cooperate with us to put on a show. What show? Continue. Fake death. Who? Jilin. You mean, let Jilin pretend to be killed by us in front of tens of thousands of soldiers, and then we disappear from the world. Then the world will be peaceful, and there will be no more red disaster? Yes. 2 questions. Bane raised 2 fingers. Speak. Who would believe that we can kill Jilin? We can't even scratch his scales, and his blood can make us disappear from the world. An ant tripping an elephant, and the elephant tripped? Even people above the age of 12 wouldn't believe that. That's right. But we have the holy sword in our hands now. This thing is enough to make people believe that we have the ability to kill Jilin. Okay. Bane didn't argue. Second question. Can Jilin cooperate with us to put on a show? Why would he? He's trying his best to heal himself. He's waiting to kill everyone when he's healed. I said, persuade him with emotion and persuade him with reason. Staya raised her head. Your Highness, can we not be vague about the key part of the plan? There are only 2 people in your plan. Why are you guarding against me? Don't tell me you still haven't thought of how to persuade Jilin. I don't say that you believe that you can persuade him. I don't believe in the theory that everything is possible if you have a firm belief. Bane narrowed his eyes and looked at Staya. His face was full of caution. Although that was the case, Bane was well aware of how bewitching the combination of Stee's righteous rogue theory and her personal charisma was. If Staya really went all out, Bane felt that he might not be able to stay firm. Bane, do you really think that Jilin wants to kill humans? Staya said seriously. Bane frowned. He thought that Staya was trying to deceive herself. Was there a need to ask this question? Jilin was so proud. Now that he was plotted against and suffered such a huge setback, he would definitely want to take revenge. He would definitely kill every human he saw. I don't think so. Staya shook her head. It seemed like she wanted to start a long story. Not a hammer. Bane raised his hand and wanted to interrupt Staya's baseless, optimistic declaration. Then, he heard a voice behind Staya. Why are you here? Bane was stunned. He thought that the voice sounded so familiar. Bane looked behind Staya. When he saw the person, Bane quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. Master Sword Saint. Staya suddenly turned around. She thought that it was no wonder that she didn't notice when someone walked behind her. It was the Sword Saint, the guy Mingwei. When I first met you in the Middle Empire's palace, I already felt that you were extraordinary. Now, it seems that I'm really good at judging people. The Sword Saint looked at Bane. His eyes flashed with an unfathomable light. This, Master Sword Saint, you're too kind. No, it's not too kind. The Sword Saint chuckled. Little friend, although your realm isn't too high, you were able to deal with the red disaster and endure humiliation. With just your body, you were able to stir up the momentum of the world and stir up such a shocking storm. You're so young, but you're really a hero. You really make me feel ashamed. Bane looked at the Sword Saint and suddenly fell silent. Every word of the Sword Saint was a compliment to him, and he was even more amiable to him. He was extremely humble. If it was someone else who said that to Bane, Bane would be very happy. However, if the Sword Saint, who was always arrogant, praised him so humbly, Bane would only think that the Sword Saint was scolding him with a smile. Master Sword Saint, you also think that I'm the reason why so many lives were lost in this war. You also think that I shouldn't have saved Lee Sana, Master Sword Saint. You also think that I should have sacrificed a weak woman to save the lives of tens of thousands. Bane had only been testing the waters at first, but in the end, his words were loud and clear. Don't you think so, too? The Sword Saint looked at Bane. His eyes were as sharp as the edge of a sword, easily piercing into Bane's heart. Yes, Bane naturally knew that sacrificing one to save tens of thousands was the right thing to do. How could he not know? If he really didn't know, he wouldn't be so conflicted. The Sword Saint's words weren't the slightest bit inferior to his swordsmanship. They were both accurate and ruthless. He immediately saw through Bane's weak point and stabbed out with his sword without missing a beat. After being exposed, Bane was like a deflated balloon, and he immediately withered. This old man thinks that you're not wrong. The Sword Saint patted Bane's shoulder. Helping those in distress and saving weak girls from suffering should be the actions of a chivalrous man of the Jianghu. What's wrong with that? Young hero, why are you being so overcautious and indecisive? You're ruining the heroic spirit of a young man. Chapter 354. I lost. Bane looked at Sword Saint's demeanor and felt that he had lost. Look at how confident he was. A real man should be like this. If you think you're right, you should do it without hesitation. It doesn't matter if it's turning the world upside down or destroying it. After being enlightened by Sword Saint, Bane suddenly felt enlightened. To the people who sacrificed themselves in this war, or even to the whole world, he was a sinner for saving Lysana. But to Bane himself, if he didn't save Lysana, he wasn't even human. At least he wasn't a man. If that was the case, then there was no need to dwell on it. Thank you, Sword Saint, for your advice. Bane bowed. Sword Saint smiled while stroking his beard. His eyes were unspeakably profound. He looked like an expert. Staya frowned as she listened behind them. What kind of logic was this? Bringing chaos to the world for one person, and then saying it so righteously. Was this the so-called Jianghu chivalrous warrior of the Middle Empire? No wonder the previous Golden King would always frown when the word Jianghu was mentioned. Until Sword Saint came into the world and calmed the storm with his sword, things didn't get better. Sword Saint, may I know why Sword Saint is here? Staya asked. Nothing. Sword Saint smiled. I'm just here to see my nephew. Oh, today the Golden King was severely injured for the sake of the world. The Church of Light will do our best to help. I hope Sir Sword Saint can rest assured. Staya said solemnly. No matter which country or era it was, doctors were always very respectful to their patients' families. The Saint of Light, has the sacred book of light. In terms of healing, she's the best in the world. I'm not worried. Sword Saint paused. I was just casually looking around. I didn't expect to meet my young friend here and have a good chat. My young friend, shall we go somewhere else? Well, Bane was stunned at first, and then he realized that something was wrong. Lord Sword Saint, what kind of status does he have in the human race? Now that the two armies were at war, how busy would he be? It was reasonable for him to visit the third prince. What's with this conversation? All right. Bane was silent for a while before he bowed and replied. Even if there was something fishy going on, Bane could not reject the Sword Saint's invitation. He was indebted to Zhang Xian for imparting his swordsmanship to him. No matter how difficult it was, he had to do it. Moreover, Bane also wanted to end the conversation with Staya so that she could calm down. He would probably let go of the idea of letting Jilin fake his death after calming down for a while. Bane, think about what I told you. If you succeed, it will be a great achievement, Staya suddenly said. Yes. Bane nodded and left with Sword Saint. When Staya said that it would be a great achievement, he agreed. After all, it could save countless people, and he could even be remembered as a hero in the end. But Bane did not have the slightest desire to complete this great achievement. This was because Staya had forgotten that any unparalleled achievement would be extremely difficult. Only when something that was originally impossible to succeed was completed by someone through countless coincidences would it shock the world and be remembered for generations to come. The probability was only 1 in 10,000. One wrong step, and he would be doomed eternally. It was an understatement to say that he was walking on a tightrope. Bane admitted that he did not have the luck of someone blessed by the heavens. On the bustling streets, there were soldiers running here and there with blood on their bodies. There were no more civilians in the city. Every house was emptied and turned into a place for the injured. Although the main battlefield was the battle between the god-killing cannons and the moving city, but there were still countless casualties among the normal human soldiers. Bane looked at the soldiers running back and forth on the streets. He did not know why Sword Saint chose this path. Although this path was the widest, it was also the most crowded. Lord Sword Saint, where are we going? Bane asked. Young friend, looking at the scene around you, does your heart ache? Sword Saint stopped and said slowly. Bane narrowed his eyes. Lord Sword Saint, what do you mean by that? Young friend, I'm not blaming you. I also believe from the bottom of my heart that the beginning of this war was not your fault. Sword Saint knew that Bane had misunderstood. But so many people were separated from their families and were beheaded. Our human race suffered such a calamity because someone made a mistake. Who do you think it was? Bane was silent. He knew who Sword Saint was talking about, but he did not want to say it. It's the Red Calamity. The culprit behind all of this is the Red Calamity. When the third prince ascended the throne, Jilin contributed. Sword Saint suddenly turned around. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he stared at Bane. Are you still so stubborn? At the time, the Red Calamity did not try to destroy our human race like it is now. Bane was silent for a long time. He looked around. Everywhere he looked, he saw the tragedy of the human race. After a while, Bane looked at the Sword Saint. Lord Sword Saint, what is the matter? I hope you can tell me clearly. The Red Calamity is a great calamity of the human race. As long as we are human, we should get rid of it as soon as possible. Now that the Red Calamity is injured, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We want to go to the dragon's nest and get rid of this calamity. We just need someone to lead the way. You want me to lead the way for you? Bane looked calm on the surface, but his heart exploded like thunder. Why are all these people like this? They all want to kill Jilin, and they all want to bring me along. Little friend, to be able to save someone from the tiger's den, you must be very familiar with Red Dragon City. Lord Sword Saint, what makes you think you can kill Jilin? Sword Saint paused. Bright snow divine weapons. We will bring hundreds of bright snow divine weapons with us for this operation. What if we can't kill Jilin? What if Jilin is almost recovered by the time we get there? The third prince is not here. This is too risky. Now is the Red Calamity's weakest time. If we can't kill him now, there will be no chance in the future. No, I need to think. What is there to think about? Look at these soldiers. They don't need to be like this. Don't you feel heartache? What are you hesitating for? I'm afraid of death, okay? Bane looked up at Sword Saint, his face full of fatigue. Sword Saint looked at Bane in a daze, then finally took a deep breath. Swoosh! A gleaming sword flashed, and a sharp sword steadily hung in front of Bane's throat. Bane's reason was too strong. Sword Saint had no reason to refute it. Everyone was afraid of death, and everyone should be afraid of death. Those who ran fast could mock those who ran slow. Those who read more could mock those who read less. And those who had money could mock those who had no money. However, those who were not afraid of death could not mock those who were afraid of death, because it was normal to be afraid of death, and most people understood it. Thus, Sword Saint could only do this. Of course it's okay to be afraid of death. Everyone is afraid of death. Sword Saint said slowly, but you don't have time to think. Lord Sword Saint, is this your way of the sword? I have no choice. Please forgive me. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.